Interlude 01. Cool in the cafe. That day, Layfon lived out a perfectly ordinary day of his life without anything abnormal. After getting out of bed in the morning, he went to school and stayed there, attending classes and absorbing all the information from his lectures without delay until dusk. Afterward, he went to his platoon training session. To the Zuellni Military Arts Department, first-year Layfon, it was a day which was devoid of anything worth mentioning, just another normal day.
His platoon training was the same as always, with Captain Nina filled with enthusiasm, Sharned, who didn't know what enthusiasm meant, Feli, who was perpetually observing from the sidelines with absolutely zero enthusiasm, and Layfon, who always obediently completed all the exercises. Feli's immediate departure at the end of training was another part of daily life.
But today, Sharned, who normally disappeared right after Feli did, was staying behind and waiting for Layfon with a somewhat sinister smile.
Hey, you don't have work today, right? You couldn't possibly.
This happened after Layfon took a relaxing shower after working up a rare sweat during training. Nina had already returned, and Sharned, who had already packed up and was ready to leave, was waiting outside the door of the training rooms in high spirits.
If you had to go to your part-time job on a day like this, I'd probably end up rolling around on the floor laughing at you.
Good, you really are a lucky guy. Let's go and share the joys of a day like this together. It's not often that I invite another guy.
As he said this, he tightly grasped Layfon's shoulders and, like that, forced Layfon out of the training area with him.
Just what are we doing? You'll just have to calm down and wait and see. Releasing a struggling Layfon from his grip, Sharned led the way with an extremely happy look on his face. Layfon quickly caught up to him, completely lost as to what was going on.
The Regios. They were the whole world.
Since the world was covered by pollutants, it was extremely difficult for normal life forms to survive on the Earth. The people who lived in the world before it was polluted had the alchemists create and pass on the Regios and continued to live the same way they did before, paying no attention to their drastic change in environment and returning to their everyday lives. Living in the wandering cities, they fought with the real inhabitants and menaces of the Earth, the filth monsters. It's here. He was brought in front of a coffee store by a confident Sharned. Calling the store a restaurant wouldn't be an exaggeration, with a sign at the doorway listing all the kinds of dishes that were available and the store sign reading, Coffee Mira. Layfon remembered his classmate Miffy saying something about the selling point of this cafe being the beautifully dressed cute waitresses who served the food and drinks.
Ah, do you like this sort of stuff, senpai?
Supposedly this was a very popular place among male customers, in comparison to its relative unpopularity among females. The mood of the cafe was flirtatious, filled with handsome young men. It suited Sharned, who always liked to hit on girls.
Cute girls are the heritage of the world, even though they aren't really part of our cultural heritage.
As he laughed at his own words, Sharned walked into the store.
Layfon was greeted by a young girl, and it really surprised him. At the door, a whole line of girls who wore cute pink uniforms greeted Layfon and Sharned.
Whoa.
Layfon was still spaced out, and before he recovered, he was already led to his seat.
What's happening?
We're leaving the best till last, right? Anyway, today is my treat, so just choose anything you like. It's not that I want to do the training seriously. It's that instead of wasting my efforts thinking about it, I might as well train instead.
I can understand that kind of thinking. Well, when you compare the interplatoon matches to the actual intercity battle, it still seems like a kind of game. Did Senpai participate in the last intercity battle?
I guess you could say that. But at the time, I hadn't gotten into a platoon yet, so I was just a normal member of the infantry. But because of that, I could just relax and do all the support work from behind the front lines. Next time will be the real thing. And if we don't win, there will be no future for Zuellni. Seeing the other platoons training seriously, and even organizing all these inter-platoon matches, I really am moved.
It's more like you're trying your luck, senpai.
If you're too serious about everything, then you won't be able to experience the joys that this world has to offer. A normal military artist would never leave victory for luck to decide. I guess I'm the only one who can do such a thing without worries. Oh, have you finished choosing what you want? Then,
Sharned motioned to a nearby waitress. So what did we really come here for?
You'll find out in a sec. Ignoring the silently smiling Sharned who wouldn't answer any of his questions, Layfon shifted his gaze to the scenery outside the window. It wasn't too long before somebody came over.
What would you like?
Her air was totally different from the girls who had welcomed Layfon at the door. It seemed like she was angry.
Ah.
As Layfon turned his head around, he found a very familiar person standing before him. Outside of training, her long hair was usually worn over, flowing her shoulders, but right now it was tied in a high ponytail with a bright red ribbon.
On that delicate face, you could say that her features were all very well proportioned. Her long eyelashes were quivering. Needless to say, she was very angry.
Feli? Senpai?
What would you like?
Before he was cut off, his voice was barely audible from the shock, the tone of his words revealing much of his underlying thoughts. It was Feli, without a doubt.
Speaking of which, there couldn't possibly be another beauty such as this in Zuellni anyway. Also a military artist of the 17th Platoon, this senpai was older than Layfon by a year, and she was also the sister of the president of the student council.
A psychokineticist prodigy. To think that Feli, who was expressionless no matter where she went, that Feli, who seemed like she was unhappy, a synonym for indifference, was wearing such a cute pink costume working in this store, was hard to believe. But she was standing before him regardless, and even her name card clipped to her chest read, Feli Loss.
What are you doing here?
Have you decided what you would like?
The second time she asked that question, she cut him off yet again in a deathly cold manner. Sharned, who was shaking all over, could take it no longer, and finally burst out laughing. Even with this, Feli continued to fume as she kept her cheeks drawn.
Have you decided what you would like?
What on earth is happening? Am I having a nightmare? In reality, her biggest failure was to be found out by Sharned Senpai while she was looking for a job. That thought wouldn't leave Feli's head as she angrily picked up the curved plates in the kitchen. Girls wearing the same cute uniforms as Feli, as if their looks were their only redeeming quality, bustled all around her. Girls with larger chests specifically wore clothing which emphasized that point, and the rest of them chose to wear chest pads to wear such clothing as well. Someone else had also suggested that Feli do the same, but the offer was immediately rejected.
Thinking back, she could only blame herself for not thinking that this kind of thing would happen. Feli continued to hide in that corner, cursing Sharnid with a furious look in her eyes.
Are you looking for a job?
After she had finished eating during her lunch break and was enjoying a cup of tea as she read through an info magazine, Sharnid came over and asked that question.
Noticing Sharnid peeking at her careers magazine over her shoulder, Feli nervously closed it. But in doing so, she revealed the cover of the magazine instead, and she ended up not hiding anything at all.
Even if she put the magazine into her bag the moment she noticed someone else reading it, there was no way she could have deceived the vision of a military artist. It was even more impossible when you considered the fact that Sharnid was a sniper in the team, and his vision was several times better than a normal military artist's in the first place.
Do you have a problem?
No. But to see Feli-chan looking for a job is not something you see every day. What's wrong? I thought your parents were sending you money for living expenses, unless for some reason this month they're experiencing some sort of financial crisis?
That's
Impossible. As she thought this, Feli decided to keep her cool and play along. She had already received the money from her parents, and although she wasn't too sure of its exact value, she knew it was far beyond what a normal student got. And that money was perfectly managed by her brother so that there would be no unnecessary waste. So getting a job had nothing to do with earning more money. But
No, you're exactly right. My brother went overboard and bought too many books.
In short, she was trying to push all the blame onto her brother.
oh, that student council president Sama? There shouldn't be any problems with the city's budget, right?
As Sharnid said this, he had a look of indifference on his face, but he is stroking his chin as if thinking intensely about something.
In other words, you want to get some money as quickly as possible?
As long as it isn't anything shady.
It's legal. It's legal. It's definitely legal. All you're doing is delivering the completed dishes to the customers.
It wasn't that she trusted that smiling Sharnid. It's only that she accepted the offer, considering the circumstances that she was in. That was how she had gotten into a situation like this.
You bastard. I'll remember this.
Sharnid hadn't actually lied to her. All she really did was ask what people wanted to eat and then serve those dishes to the customers. But she never thought that she would be brought to a shop where you had to wear costumes like this.
Hearing someone shouting, Feli turned around, and it was something like, "To think she was being hired by a man like this."
Seeing the shop owner happily nodding at the waitress's replies, Feli's head felt like it hurt even more.
His nightmare got even worse. As he thought this, Layfon pretended to not notice the man in the strange uniform and continued to eat.
Layfon, this here is my classmate from my first year here, and right now he's going into the clothing industry.
Huh. Nice to meet you. A couple of normal stores also use this sort of uniform as the basis for their designs.
Yeah, there isn't a single girl in the world who would understand the cuteness of those uniforms. Listening to words that seemed logical and incomprehensible at the same time,
Layfon decided to not make any judgments and remain as a listener for the entirety of the conversation. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't imagine Feli coming to work at a place like this by herself.
Yeah, we were. She was looking for a job, so I introduced her here.
Sharnet obviously didn't make it very clear to Feli as to the nature of her job before she arrived. Layfon began to feel sorry for Feli. But still, it seemed strange that Feli, who had never had a job, suddenly needed one.
Well, the thing is, not many people like this sort of stuff in the first place, so if you think about it from a business standpoint, opening here is actually not a bad choice. Regardless of what happens though, if this continues on, at this rate everyone is going to go broke. If the competition gets too fierce, it won't be good for the economy either.
So you decided to hire Feli Senpai.
That's exactly right. It seemed like he understood, but then looked like he didn't, showing an expression which was difficult to describe.
Then, does Senpai know about this?
Of course she knows. I have already given her the pay for next week.
Ah, I see.
A week, eh? If it was spent doing a job you didn't like, the week would probably pass by very slowly. And it was a job which was in complete contrast with her image. It should be okay, right? She would definitely make a mistake somewhere down the line.
What would you like?
What drink would you like? Would you like me to bring it up together? Or do you want to wait until you've finished eating for me to bring it over?
Okay, it'll be ready in a moment.
Faintly, a feeling of cold indifference rose up over that cute atmosphere which the pink uniform created, making the customers flinch. Feli looked as if she didn't see them at all and left the table. After she left the table, the customers let out a sigh, released from that tension. As Feli gave the orders to the kitchen, the store owner said,
Smiling, is it? To smile.
He looked at the busy waitresses in the other stores. Feli looked over at the girls who were standing there, all of them with bright, clear smiles on their faces. At the same time, she noticed all the males in there had a lusty look on all their faces. Perhaps he followed Feli's line of sight, as the store owner immediately followed up with a couple of lines.
That's hard too.
Frank,
The store owner was also starting to feel a little insecure.
I've never tried smiling before. It confuses people into not knowing what to think. Ha! Welcome, 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 welcome.
Just like this, they continued to do this for a length of time. About an hour had passed. The store owner showed his weakness first.
That wasn't my original intention.
Feli decided that she would put on an innocent look, but there was practically no way for her to communicate that. It was always like that. Feli had trouble with expressing her feeling to anyone other than her family members.
So that's all they could say. The store owner wiped the sweat off his forehead and thought it over a little before continuing.
Ha! No, that's...
The store owner pranced away with impossibly tiny footsteps, and Feli couldn't stop him. It wasn't because she was worried about what he was thinking that she couldn't properly communicate with him.
She didn't really care what he thought of her. How other people perceived her wasn't a problem for Feli at all. Right now the issue was, to tell the truth, she wanted to resign. She didn't need any money at all, and she didn't think that this job was very interesting either. And it wasn't like she had no option other than to do the job. Indeed, she really wanted to throw the week's worth of pay she was given in advance right in the store owner's face and just leg it out of there. No, this was serious.
If she could run away from that shop owner who was constantly making these weird noises, Feli would definitely do that.
That's... It doesn't matter how you do it, but please give me a more normal response. All the time?
Keeping a constant distance between herself and the shop owner who was still shaking from his recent excitement, Feli looked at the uniform she was wearing again. It should have been changed a little. The design of the uniform was definitely different from the others. The uniform doubtlessly still retained its cute feel, having kept its pink color. They had started from pink and finally returned to pink. She felt that if they were going to use that uniform emphasize her selling points, it would be a little forced.
Please don't just casually put out a motto like that.
He didn't look troubled at all. Instead, seeing the shop owner revealing an expression of utmost satisfaction at the new uniform, Feli couldn't say anything.
Just like this, with the dropping of the shop owner's tears, the sales wars began.
Okay, let me have a look at what the uniform has turned into.
Why did we have to come to a place like this?
After training ended, Layfon was dragged here by Sharnet again. This was the roof of some tall building. Layfon listlessly asked Sharnet, who was lying on the water tank enhancing his vision with internal type K and looking toward the store.
If I peeped at her from close up, I'd probably piss Feli off, yeah.
So they say,
Even if it's her, she probably wouldn't be using psychokinesis while she's at work.
no, that's not what I'm trying to say.
If anything diverges from the plan, then I'll lose all the money I put into the bet.
You bet on something again?
Of course, that's why I prepared the ultimate weapon.
And the ultimate weapon refers to.
Well, you'll see.
Sharnid dragged Layfon over by the neck, and Layfon used his K unwillingly and looked across to the cafe. The store was filled with people. In the midst of it all, girls wearing pink uniforms rushed back and forth. Of the people who were sitting in the cafe, the majority of them were pretty much male students in uniform. Their eyes were glowing as they looked towards the girls in the pink uniforms. And out of all the girls, the male students were all looking towards Feli.
Feli, wearing a custom uniform, wore the same cold expression on her face as she carried the plates back and forth. After placing their meals in front of the stunned customers, she left without a shred of warmth in her expression. Even so, all the male customers in the store were completely satisfied.
How is it? I have no idea how to describe this situation, thought Layfon. Feli was the same as always, with a cold, featureless expression. What was more striking was an annoyed look, as if she had been forced to do this reflected on her doll-like face, even though she should be very nervous at carrying all those dishes around. Yet,
It seems like you still don't get it,
said Sharnid as he shook his head.
It doesn't matter that she doesn't provide a service which makes you feel very welcome. Look, see all those girls around her who are attending to the customer's every need. Look at them all smiling the same smile, and even the girls who are even a little cute just get buried under the whole group. No matter how much prettier Feli is, she would probably be the same, buried by the rest of the girls. That's the result of the uniforms. Wearing the same uniforms, doing the same things and saying the same words, it will always bury a person's individuality to an extent. The only people who could tell all those waitresses apart would be the waitresses themselves. But Feli is different. She's definitely wearing the same systematic uniform, but the impression she makes is different to the rest of them. And on top of that, the other girls are obviously treating the guests enthusiastically. What's wrong with her? Is probably what most of the people are thinking when they see her. As long as you give them this kind of an impression, you've won. She's already a lot prettier than the rest, making other people wish they could see her smile. Not the smile she uses to greet the customers. Her real smile.
Her real smile. Speaking of which, Layfon hasn't ever seen it either.
Senpai, have you seen Feli Senpai smiling before?
No. She already has a fan club, and the people there haven't caught her honestly smiling either. But there are heaps of people who are willing to pay a lot of money for a picture of her smiling.
Speaking of which, what's in that box?
Besides Sharnid, there was a box which he could carry over his shoulder.
That's a telescopic camera which I borrowed from the people in the newspaper club.
You're trying to get pictures too.
Naturally,
said Sharnid confidently, leaving Layfon sighing in resignation. Just like that, he unconsciously probed the area around him.
How do I say it? There seems to be a lot of people around here.
They are the members of the fan club. Damn, they really are quick. If it's like this, even if it's a smile out of professional duty, it'll have to do.
Sharnid anxiously got the camera out of the box and proceeded to get into position. In that position, he looked like a sniper who had already locked onto his target.
No matter what, I must take a photo of her smiling.
Seeing Sharnid erase his presence completely with his external type K right in front of him, Layfon tilted his head, using internal type K to boost his oral sensory organ, or more commonly known as the ear, and listened for any changes. With a clang, the dishes that were originally on the tray fell out in front of Feli. The spaghetti bolognese was tipped all over the floor and the sauce spilt out with it. The empty tray fell onto the floor spinning, going shada shada. The waitresses who saw this immediately began to apologize successively, and Feli turned her head looking over her shoulder behind her. Somebody had pushed Feli from behind her, making her lose her balance and drop the meal. But as she turned her head to look back, there wasn't anyone near her. She must have been set up. The person who pushed Feli from behind vanished just like that, during the instant when Feli's concentration was broken by the fallen dishes. Was it on purpose? Who? While she was looking for some person who had already vanished, an angry voice cut in. It came from a guest who was on the table beside Feli, whose uniform was splattered with oily dots from the sauce. The waitress who was holding on to the mop froze in confusion. That person was wearing a military artist's uniform, and the expression on his face was doubtlessly one of fury. The store suddenly quieted down.
My most sincere apologies.
Feli lowered her head.
Feli lowered her head, listening to that person's words,
and she immediately realized that that person wasn't really angry. It was all an act.
As she noticed this, Feli immediately checked the feelings on her hips. The sword belt wasn't there. Of course, she didn't have her dite rod hidden anywhere either. Realizing that she was about to teach that person a lesson, Feli remembered what she was here to do. Since she was taking care of a customer, she couldn't do that.
I'm extremely sorry.
Just like that, she lowered her head and repeated those same words. She couldn't think of anything else to say.
The store owner spoke in an extremely high-pitched voice, as if to ward off the awkwardness of the situation, and quickly appeared in front of Feli. The customer moved in front of Feli with difficulty, as she had been pushed aside by the store manager, who was acting as if he were lamenting.
That was actually a very appropriate statement. However, she didn't lose her calm but instead felt a cutting pain on her skin. Feli was also very self-conscious about the fact that she couldn't smile properly. When she was practicing with the store owner, she felt that even if she didn't smile very often, she should still be able to do it. She was quite shocked herself.
I'm extremely sorry.
But right now, the problem wouldn't just go away after laughing a little, and she couldn't even put on a smiling expression anyway. Feli just kept her head lowered for the whole time.
I'm sorry.
In the resting room, Feli lowered her head as she apologized to the store owner.
Said the store owner, light-heartedly dismissing the apology with a wave of his hand. That customer had left after taking the money for cleaning his clothes.
Feli was allowed to have a short break, which is why she was in this resting room, which doubled as a changing room for the girls that worked here. Feli stared at the spiraling pattern that spread across the teacup in the store owner's hand.
I really wasn't suited to do things like serving customers.
There wasn't a single time where she revealed her true smile. All she did the whole time was listen to the customers' conversations closely.
In that kind of a situation, what would Carrion have done, thought Feli. He would probably deal with it perfectly. No, her brother would never let the customer get angry in the first place. But Feli couldn't do it, and she was completely lost on what to do.
Then,
She never thought that she would be praised, and Feli started feeling dazed about all this. When he put it like that, for some reason Feli suddenly felt calm again.
Ha!
She kind of understood the meaning behind these words. While using psychokinetists to gather enormous amounts of information, if their bodies reacted to all of the information they received, it would waste a large amount of time. So in order to prevent this kind of reaction, the brain limited the amount of information sent to the nervous system in the body. If that repeated continuously over time, the result would be the same as how Feli was now. Whether it be shock, anger, or grief, and even laughter, all of those emotions are processed within the brain, and thus, Feli became an emotionless doll.
Is that true?
The store owner's promise seems somewhat unreliable.
But I'm extremely grateful to you. I don't know if I've figured out where my goal is. I was just thinking that a person already assigned to the military arts department who is unable to read the atmosphere and who regretted it might exist.
The store owner tilted his head, looking at Feli, and Feli felt that the gloomy atmosphere had gotten somewhat more relaxed, and her facial expressions recovered likewise. After bidding the store owner good day, Feli left the resting room.
That really scared me, muttered the store owner to himself as he spaced out in the resting room. Really? That child can smile too. If she practiced a little more, she could do a professional smile as well. But it'll be impossible by this week. And I don't know if that child will still work here after this. The store owner's inner musings never reached Feli's ears.
A little distance away from the store, in a nearby alleyway, stood the man from before. He was looking uncomfortably at his surroundings as he flattened out his tie. This waitress had accepted the bribe of a rival to Cafe Mira. In today's competitive market, buying people out was perfectly natural. But amidst all that, transactions such as these occur quietly in the background. This is also something which the Commerce Department was worried might happen. At this moment, they heard a new voice.
So, that's how it is, huh? Well, I knew it would be like this anyway. Who cares who I am? To appear in a situation like this, I must be a hero of justice, right? Do you understand your position?
Sharnid stood there, looking like he was blocking the way to the exit of the lane.
That's how it is.
Sharnid snickered at the slowly retreating boy.
Well, if it was just me, it wouldn't really be a problem. But there's someone else who wants to have a little chat with you guys.
After hearing Sharnid's words, the other two finally noticed.
You should be feeling your backs getting cold about now. I was surprised at how relaxed you guys were. But how do you feel now?
It was as if there was a gale behind them. They gingerly turned around, and standing there was, stunned to silence, the two just stood there rigidly like corpses. Layfon was standing behind them, gazing at them, silently. He wasn't holding anything in his hands, but his dite was clearly hung on his hip belt for all to see. It felt like he could whip it out in an instant.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with us, but...
There was a very quiet knocking sound. It was the sound of Layfon tapping the dite with his fingers. Da, da, da. The sounds reverberated through the small alleyway with rhythm.
Did you know? There's a rule specifically dealing with duels between military artists in the student handbook. Well, if we did this in public, we would break the rule, but if you reject others' challenges, it's a sort of disgrace to a military artist. It's not easy to reject another's challenge.
As he said this, Sharnid slowly pulled out the student handbook.
Let me see, okay? Let's see. Let's see. If there's to be a duel between military artists on school grounds, you must first apply to the student council for permission, and after verification of the two students' identities, the duel is to take place at a specified arena. The weapons must comply with the Academy City's regulations, etc.
He closed the student handbook with a slap. So, you'll have to wait until our trump card decides to apply for a duel before this can proceed. If you piss him off, even just a little, then you'll no longer get to speak reason to him. So, let me tell him.
Da, da. The sound was continuing. Seeing the paling boy, Sharnid continued.
So, what do you say?
Then that makes it very difficult for us. That's obviously against the rules. Then, about the uniform, it's the proof of what kind of student you are. And if there's no valid reason to be wearing another type of uniform, then you'll have to receive punishment. It says here.
It's much better than a duel. As the male student lamented, he took off his military artist uniform and threw it onto the floor. Duh, the sound stopped. The boy looked relieved as he collapsed in a heap onto the floor.
I guess it's okay like that as well. Then we're done over here, but not quite yet over there, eh?
The blanching waitress looked down upon Sharnid with a belittling expression.
Whoa, acting like you don't know him already? Well, if you want to take this approach, it's fine as well. Then how did she drop all those dishes and spill it over a customer's trousers? It seems she was going to pretend she didn't hear what the other boy had said previously. No, she was insisting that she didn't even speak to the boy. Of course, Layfon and Sharnid both knew Feli, so you could say they were protecting one of their own people and lying. No, that's not such a simple problem. As he said this, he took out the camera.
I prepared this baby to catch a Kodak moment, but instead it caught a different moment instead.
I got the decisive shot. We haven't broken the student rules by doing this. At least we shouldn't have. Anyway, if the Commerce Department catches wind of some bad rumors, it might be pretty difficult to find any jobs in the future. Looking at the silent waitress, Sharnid gave Layfon a signal with his eyes, telling him what to do. But Layfon didn't reply either. The blood rushing to his head was genuine. Him getting pissed off wasn't an act either, but to pressure a girl in a dilemma to make a choice still seemed low. And it wasn't their place to deal with this girl either. If he still forced her to make a decision, it would seem a little excessive. If they were officially questioned, it would actually be Layfon and Sharnid who wouldn't be able to answer.
Really? What the hell are you guys doing?
Hearing a tired sigh, Layfon and Sharnid's bodies both shivered from the surprise.
Oh, Feli-chan. Are you well?
Of course. I'm having a wonderful time working at some brilliant store somebody recommended to me.
Wow, but isn't that obviously displeasure in your voice?
And on top of that, you make someone your money tree?
As she said this, Feli walked up to Sharnid and pulling the camera off him and took out the memory card in an instant.
I'm confiscating this.
That memory card has a huge storage capacity, and it was pretty expensive. Can you return it to me afterwards?
Denied.
Hearing this, Sharnid powerlessly lowered his head. Ignoring Sharnid's reaction, Feli stood in front of the waitress.
The girl looked at Feli with contempt and provocation. Feli brought down her palm with a lot of force.
The sound didn't seem to match with the small alley. Or rather, it was a huge noise you would expect to find on busy highways, reverberating in that tiny side street. The sound was so loud it left Layfon and Sharnid stunned for a moment.
Well, with that, your debt to me has gone away quite easily. I'll just leave you to the store owner and let him deal with you.
Saying that, Feli stared steadily at her and walked past Sharnid, quickly returning to the store. The four people behind her watched her leave, stunned. It was already deep into the night. The shift was over and Feli came out from the store. When she looked up, she saw a familiar person standing in front of her.
You were here.
Layfon stood under a lamppost near the store.
Yeah, well,
Could it be that you've been waiting here for the whole time?
no. Even for me, that would be too...
No willpower?
Yeah.
As Feli finished speaking, she didn't even stop and left, and Layfon chased after her.
I'll walk you home.
Of course you will. You've been waiting for so long, so of course you would.
And just like that, they continued to walk silently. But she still felt conscious about Layfon, who was walking behind her just out of her peripheral vision. His expression at that time was the exact opposite of that when he was fighting filth monsters. It really made people want to sigh. It was like a child throwing a fit. Feli sighed.
Really? Thanks for before.
No, I'm sorry. I just went ahead and did something unnecessary.
You were really pissed off, weren't you? I could feel your killing intent from all the way inside the store. Looking at you threatening those two people, you seemed pretty happy to me.
No, that was all Sharnid-senpai's idea.
Why were you so angry?
That it seems I really can't bear to see my friends being bullied.
She had guessed it was probably something like this much earlier, and her expectations for any other reasons were disappointing.
Well, that's just how you are.
And besides, I also wanted to help Senpai. Feli try out things other than being a psychokinesist.
He whispered this at a barely audible volume to himself, surprising Feli so much that she couldn't catch her breath. This person really is. She wanted to live a life outside that of a psychokinesist.
Her brother knew that Feli had this dream. Other than him, there was only Layfon. He really is. He really is. He really is. Nobody else knew, only Layfon. She never even told her captain, Nina, and this man she did tell didn't even understand the meaning behind it. But at that time, she didn't know what kind of expression to put on. He was cheering for me, worrying about me. It really makes me happy. But Layfon, who knew of her dream, didn't recognize the deeper meaning to this dream at all, and his slowness really made Feli angry. Now, how was she going to show both those expressions at once? Right now, she was completely lost on what expression to use.
Fine, I'm going home.
Feli loudly ended the conversation and continued on forward, and as she confirmed the sounds of Layfon's chasing footsteps, she walked a little bit faster.
Interlude 02.
What's wrong?
Speaking of which, there aren't any Heaven's Blade successors who use metal whips, are there?
I think you should know more about these things than I do.
I guess I should. Well, including me, there are 3 people who use swords, and if you exclude Delbone, there's a person using his fists, a longsword, a shield, a gun, a staff, a bow, and metal spheres. There isn't anyone who uses metal whips.
What's the matter, bringing up these things now?
Well, it's about my captain, Nina-senpai.
Yeah, it was just teaching her some moves. But I've taught her a lot of different moves before. Because Layfon isn't used to teaching others, that person must be having a hard time learning, right?
Maybe it's like that. So that's why I suddenly thought of a move at that moment. It's a move that couldn't be more suitable for her. But I can't remember where I picked up that move from.
You've gotten dementia.
Maybe it's like that. But as long as I've seen a move once, I can immediately recognize the direction of its K-flow, so maybe it wasn't a Heaven's Blade successor's move. I should be able to remember a person who used such an elegant move, even if I've only seen him once.
But to make Layfon so eager to teach her that move, that person must be really talented.
Yeah, she's really hardworking as well.
Oh?
Not only that, she's also very frank. I doubt there's anyone else who's as direct as she is. But then again, she's a little bit of a klutz at times.
You don't have the right to say that about others.
Really?
Yes, really.
But I'm a little bit envious. Even though she's clumsy, she's still very straightforward about everything. It really makes me envious.
Yeah, maybe.
Diamond Passion, Volume 8, Chapter 4.
In the academy, city of Zuellni, as a military artist elite, she was allowed to enter a platoon as only a 3rd year, making her a very accomplished girl. At the same time, she was a person who was involved with the dilemma Zuellni was facing, and was very passionate about doing something for the city.
But where did this passion come from? He felt that if he went and asked her, he might be able to understand her feelings completely, but then again, he might never be able to understand.
Is it really okay?
It's okay.
A completely spiritless Layfon nodded his head. They were in a training area that was especially reserved for the 17th Platoon of Zuellni. Soundproof and shockproof materials were used to isolate this huge space, and in it stood the captain of the 17th Squad, Nina, and her platoon member, Layfon. Only platoons with the bare minimum of 4 fighting members, such as the 17th Squad, felt that the training area was extremely spacious, and in a situation like today when there were only 2 people, it felt even more spacious. It was also an unavoidable reality. Today was a rest day with lessons only before lunch, so most of the platoons had finished training by dusk. Even if the sounds of training came through the neighboring walls, it would probably be some hard-working individual practicing by himself.
Is it really okay?
Asked Nina almost naggingly as she confirmed the sensation of the 2 restored dites she held in each of her hands. The whips that she wielded were weapons designed to emphasize offensive capabilities.
Any time is fine.
Again, he nodded as if unaware of anything.
I can't say how this'll turn out.
Facing Layfon's attitude, Nina felt a little annoyed. She felt that she was being underestimated.
Considering their strength, that would be understandable as well. The problem was that he wasn't even holding a dite in his hands, and not only that, he had loosened his sword strap as well, while still standing around with a complacent look on his face, which made Nina feel like he had seriously insulted her dignity. She wouldn't ask him again. She immediately got her internal type K flowing. Using the internal type K generated from within her to reinforce her entire body, she immediately cut down the distance between herself and Layfon. Following up on her charge, she brought out her right-hand metal whip. Nina locked onto Layfon's left shoulder. Layfon was in the center of her vision as she charged at him, and showing no signs of moving, just caught Nina's strike just like that. The force in that strike was more than enough to rend flesh, to smash bone into little pieces. Even though the strike was that powerful, it was as if it had fallen upon a steel wall, and her wrist received a jarring impact instead.
Ugh.
Even though she didn't let go of the steel whip, Nina was caught completely off guard, and kept her distance from Layfon.
Do it more seriously.
Layfon turned to face Nina, whose wrist was racked with pain, and spoke to her in a critical manner.
That attack was nothing like Senpai's usual attacks. You have to attack even more seriously, and make it so that I'm forced to evade it. If you can't do that, then there's no meaning to what I'm going to show you next.
She's been training with Layfon for a long time now, and it wasn't only after the platoon training sessions, but also with him during their rest days. But she had never seen Layfon like this before.
What's wrong?
She didn't ask him like that. A part of it was because she knew now wasn't the time to ask something like that, but she knew the real reason was her curiosity for what Layfon was going to show her next. Nina quietly increased the density of her internal type K. Being able to do this in a blink of an eye was thanks to Layfon's training as well. The unique breathing method she used when using internal type K was also the result of taking Layfon's advice. He told her to keep her breath the same as it normally was, and as a result, she managed to master internal type K. When she first started, she would get exhausted very quickly. It felt like she couldn't properly control the K which burned within her, but now she could stabilize her K easily. She could feel her muscles expanding beneath her skin. It wasn't just her muscles. Even the bones which held up her body was filling with K, making them harder. Her body was like a spring, coiling up and gathering energy, and then releasing it all. The target that she had locked onto hadn't changed. It was still the left shoulder. She brought her arm down in a direct stroke from up high. She released all her K at the moment of impact.
Woo!
Again, her wrist sent out a signal of pain as Nina looked at an unperturbed Layfon. This time, Layfon moved. Grabbing Nina's right arm, which was targeting his left shoulder, he punched her with the other hand in the stomach. The K, which he released from his fist, caused Nina to be flung against the opposing wall. Her back rammed into the wall. Then Nina fell onto the ground with a crash.
What the hell's going on?
Layfon didn't hold back with his strike at all. Nina stood up quickly. Layfon stood there showing no signs of being injured, completely still.
Do you understand what I just did?
No, other than filling your whole body up with K, I have no idea what you did.
Replied Nina, shaking her head. It was true. That's all she had figured out from all that. Her right wrist was aching. It was the evidence that all the power in her strike had been deflected back easily. If she hadn't loosened her grip at the moment of impact, the recoil would probably have been even greater. Layfon carried the first aid kit over, deftly treating Nina's wrist.
Ah! I'm sorry.
It's okay.
He sprayed her wrist with a cooling mist to ease the pain, then used a bandage to wrap it up and secure it. Nina concentrated her internal type K near her wrist. Even though she didn't expect any real results, at least it would speed up her recovery.
What was that you did back there?
Compared to the pain in her wrist, she cared about that more. That move was probably what Layfon was going to show Nina. Even if it was like that, She couldn't understand it at all.
It didn't feel like striking a person at all. It felt as if I was hitting something very hard.
That was the Heaven's Blade Successor Reverse's move.
It was a Heaven's Blade successor's move?
The Heaven's Blade successors of Lance-shelled City Grendon were really powerful military artists who could single-handedly take on filth monsters. And standing in front of her, Layfon was also a Heaven's Blade successor before he came to Zuellni.
This technique is the only reason Reverse became a Heaven's Blade successor, and it's no surprise.
Is it really that powerful of a technique?
No doubt it was, deflecting Nina's technique so easily. But relying on just that technique to become a Heaven's Blade successor seemed a little surprising. Layfon is very strong. He warded off 2 attacks on Zuellni from the filth monsters by himself. But during those battles, Nina was standing aside and watching. That stunning scene made you forget to breathe. And the second time, fighting that mature form filth monster, Layfon performed moves which were impossible for Nina. But most importantly of all, when he was facing such a huge existence, he didn't show any signs of fear. To be able to do all that by himself, that was the definition of strong. And that's why Nina started harboring thoughts of not being able to do anything by herself.
Kongu-K. That's what this technique is called. It defends against all attacks and then causes them to rebound. The strongest shield. And then there is the strongest Guandao, halberd, wielded by Kontia, which can cut through anything. This pair's combination attacks have massacred large numbers of filth monsters.
So that's why.
She understood that reasoning. A team, which was made up of 2 people who had reached a genius level in their offense and defense, would surely be a formidable combination. But Layfon shook his head as Nina thought of this explanation.
There's Kontia, who only attacks and completely disregards defense, and there's Reverse, who only defends and never bothers with offense. Think about it carefully, and imagine the situation. With that body, she takes on the relentless attacks of the filth monsters with such concentration that she barely blinks. Can you imagine that, Captain?
Nina didn't reply and was frozen on the spot. When they were battling the mature form of filth monster, Nina acted as the bait. At that time, the filth beast was coming closer and closer, pressuring her, and Nina was so scared that she couldn't move at all. She thought it was going to be the same as a battle, so she didn't think that there would be any problems. At that time, she never even imagined she might be torn into shreds by those gigantic teeth. She decided that she would imagine herself in such a situation more often. What kind of people would be there?
The basic idea of Kongu-K is to use internal type K to reinforce your body and simultaneously follow the K of an attack and reflect it. It's actually very simple in theory, but the hard part is getting the timing right and to always be staring at the opponent with a persistent glare, and to do that you have to have a very strong will. You have to do those 2 things.
As he said, to always be staring at the opponent with a persistent glare, she already thought that it was possible for her to master this technique. But if it was as he said, then it shouldn't be that easy to learn. After all the training, Nina finally understood this from her experience.
Oh, wow. Nina woke up to excruciating pain in her muscles.
How long it had been? Even before, she hadn't ever been like this before. Now she thought about it. Recently, every time she had forgotten her restraint and pushed herself too much, she had done something that made her whole body sore with pain. But self-training alone, all the time to the point of being hospitalized, ended up as the catalyst for Layfon to start training her, providing Nina with very valuable training sessions. Ignoring the pain, she sat up with that blank look of having just woken up, adjusting her K-breathing. This was her latest daily routine she had to go through. Her ultimate goal was to be able to maintain her K-breathing even when she was sleeping, but right now, she still couldn't do it. It wasn't actually to flood her lungs with K, but it was to stabilize the flow of K coming from her K vein in her back. That was called K-breathing. As she proceeded with her K-breathing, she unconsciously looked around her room. Looking at her bed, her study desk, and her wardrobe, you could immediately tell it was a private room. It was Nina's living space. The toilet, the showers, and the kitchen were all shared. Nina lived in the girls' dorms. This was built a few years ago as practice for the architecture students for their graduation. The designer had called it a work of art, and you could see this clearly from the outside of the building. It was built in an archaic wooden house style, and on the inside, everywhere you looked you could see carefully designed ornaments. The 3 shared rooms were also very spacious and luxurious, making people who lived in other apartments and dormitories feel envious. But the thing was, that place wasn't very popular. The main reason was that it was too far away from school. And another reason was the noise pollution. Originally, the land nearby was prepared for architecture students to undergo training so they would build many different structures or knock down the older buildings. The reason that the girls' dorm that Nina lived in hadn't been knocked down was that the person who designed this returned to his home city after graduating and won an award for the design, so they kept this building as a memorial of sorts.
A house without people living in it would quickly fall into disrepair, so they turned it into a so-called girls' dorm and rented it out. But when it got dark, the lack of people felt creepy to many residents, so there were very few people who lived in that dorm. Because of all the terrible conditions, the rent was low, so Nina decided to live here.
Nina had finished adjusting her K breathing and now fully awake, she used her internal type K to ease the pain in her muscles. This level of muscle soreness only needed some sort of K to be maintained in the area, and the pain would be gone by around noon.
Internal type K, or katsuke, could be used to reinforce the body and remove fatigue. If in an emergency one fully released all their internal type K and continually reinforced their body, afterward there would be very scary side consequences waiting for the user. Nina had experienced this period of aftershock herself. However, if it was used appropriately, one could achieve accelerated recovery. Feeling a lot more comfortable, Nina placed a panda plushie that she had been hugging all that time onto the jutting windowsill beside her bed. The plushie had been mended in several places and gave an overall appearance of being very old and worn. That plushie was one of the few things that Nina had brought here from her hometown. It was a present from her grandfather when she was little, and she wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully if she wasn't hugging it. Wearing a set of light pink pajamas, Nina walked out of her room, going to wash her face.
As soon as she walked into the hallway, the mouth-watering smell of melted butter assaulted her. Nina hurriedly looked at the clock hanging on the wall beside the stairs.
It was an ancient clock that had to be wound, telling Nina that breakfast was about to start. Nina quickly walked towards the washing basin, washed her face, and then returned to her room to change. Just as she finished changing, at the same time a clanging sound reverberated with the other noises around the dorm at a level far beyond ear-splitting. Put simply, it was the sound of metal hitting metal, but to call it a weapon created solely for pissing people off wasn't excessive at all. No alarm clock in existence could possibly create a sound as annoying as this.
Whoa!
After a while, she heard the ringing again. Normally, she got up well before the sound went off, but she had overexerted herself in yesterday's training session, so she slept in a little. Even if she lived this irregular life, the only schedule she strictly followed was her mealtimes. That was one of the rules of the girls' dorm.
I'm up! I'm up already!
Shouting at the top of her lungs from her room loudly, Nina scrambled out of her room. The girl beside the stairs was holding a soup spoon and was beating a pan. The noise this made was known as the most effective weapon designed to wake people up in the morning. As she said this, she stopped hitting the frying pan and pulled out her earplugs.
I'm sorry.
Seeing that the noise had stopped, Nina apologized in a relieved manner. This girl's name was Selena Vin. She was a fourth-year alchemy student, and she was also the dorm manager. The reason that she was the dorm manager was because of all the people who lived here. She was the only one who could cook. People who could control food were the greatest people in the world, as decreed by the last dorm manager who graduated last year. Saying this, Selena went downstairs first. Nina helplessly chased after her. All of the people who lived in the dorm were already seated at the table in the dining room.
Morning, Lou.
The person who called out to Nina was another person who lived in this dorm, and after replying, Nina also took her place at the table. Today's breakfast was toast fried in butter and dipped in milk, along with salad and tea. On a table which could seat 10 people, there was only enough food for 3. That is to say, these 3 people were all of the people who lived in this all-girls dorm.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's not it. Only 2 people graduated from here, but it's because nobody new came to live here.
Looking at Selena frowning with displeasure, Nina shook her head helplessly.
Well, even if she wasn't scared away, there would only be 4 people. In this dorm for 10 people, there isn't even half that.
At least she had to reassure her first. Nina moved her feet under the table slightly, and her toes touched something. It was a something that was quite hard.
That'll never happen, yeah?
Pretending to listen to what Leo and Selena were saying, Nina had put all her attention into looking for the something under the table. What is that thing? There was a normal plate placed there. On the plate, there were the dishes left over from last night. There wasn't any problem, seeing as plates were made for dishes to be placed on them. There wasn't any problem with that. The question was, what was a plate doing on the floor? And next to the plate, there was a chipped soup bowl with some milk inside. Why was this? As Selena held extended her welcome,
there was a creepy noise.
Leo looked at the thing that flew out from under the table with a surprised expression. It must have been ordered to stay under the table until this moment. Under the table, there were many plates with all the leftovers from last night. She obviously heard Selena's introduction, but that was a completely inadequate explanation of the phenomenon in front of her. As for Selena's question, Nina couldn't answer it. She was drenched in cold sweat and it wasn't stopping. Below her feet there was a terrifying creature. It was a creature she could grab with one hand, eating the leftovers in the dish like a wild beast. It looked like it was pretty hungry. Its slender body gave out a feeling of immaturity. It had grown long claws in order to run around the ground more easily. In its mouth, there were small, sharp teeth tearing at the leftover food. It was a ferret.
Ah! Wah!
That creature lifted its head and licked its mouth, its front legs rubbing its face before it stood up, looking about at its surroundings, looking at Nina. Those glossy round eyes were filled with curiosity.
Nina let out a deafening cry and jumped onto the table.
The two of them stared stunned at Nina, who was shaking on the table. The ferret was frightened by Nina's cry and hugged Selena's leg, hiding behind it.
No, it's only those that I can't stand.
Seeing Nina holding her head and shrinking away, the two looked at each other. In the end, they took Steven the ferret back to Selena's room and continued their breakfast.
If you two want to laugh, then laugh.
Seeing her shoulders still quivering slightly, the two couldn't help not laughing, but didn't make a noise, and Nina just sat there pretending to calmly eat breakfast, but her veins near her temples were still throbbing.
It was that thing's fault in the first place.
Just thinking about it scares me. It was when I was 5. Because my uncle loved animals, he kept a lot of pets and livestock at his house. At that time, I often went to that uncle's house to play. On my 5th birthday, everyone in my extended family came to wish me a happy birthday. My uncle also came. He told me there was a surprise waiting for me in my bedroom. Even though I wanted to see what it was immediately, he told me to wait until the birthday party was over. So I had no choice but to be patient and wait.
Nina shivered as she recalled it.
My uncle prepared a ferret for me. Originally, it was meant to be safely housed inside its cage. I don't know if it had something to do with the metal lock being broken, but somehow that ferret got out of its cage.
It would be great if that were all. That thing. My precious plushie.
Yeah, it was chewing my precious Mitesha with tearing noises.
Recalling the scene, Nina continued to quiver. What the young Nina saw when she returned to her room was an evil monster using its vicious teeth and tearing a hole in Mitesha's stomach, and was pulling out the cotton stuffing within into long, thin strands.
To me, Mitesha isn't just a precious plushie I got from my grandfather. It's a precious friend who keeps me company through the night. Even though it was so important, that thing.
With my mother's help, Mitesha was restored to his former glory, but on his body there was an irrevocable scar. From then on, every time she saw a ferret, she would remember what happened back then, and she would be so terrified that she would start shaking.
After breakfast, the three of them were drinking tea together. Looking at a very sad Selena, Nina was speechless.
Reminded Leo quietly. She knew this as well. As soon as Selena was in a situation that was disadvantageous to her, she would put on a childlike appearance. It was her solution to everything. Even though Nina knew this, she couldn't do anything against this expression of Selena's, and her everyday meals were always made by this person who they always wanted to thank. When it came to any of her requests, they always felt that it was hard to deny her. Nina continually shook her head, reminding herself in her heart, "Okay, I'm going to refuse." As she thought this, she looked up at Selena. It was completely unfair to be saying this sort of thing with an expression as if she were going to cry.
Okay. I understand.
As she said this in a tiny voice, Leo, who was sitting beside her quietly said, "Idiot."
On one condition. Quickly tell him to never get close to me.
Seeing Selena happily make her promise, Nina showed a trace of glumness.
Noon that day, Layfon was startled to see a languished Nina coming to the training area. Could it be because of yesterday's training? Aware of the possibility, Layfon was worried. Nina showed an exhausted smile and shook her head.
It has nothing to do with yesterday's training, it's just this morning. It was like that.
In response to a vague reply like that, Layfon cast a confounded look over to Nina, but she didn't attempt to explain it any further.
Let's just train for now. What are we doing today? Are we continuing what we did yesterday?
Nina thought that she would need that kind of strong defense.
Today we're doing basic training.
Why? I want to get the essentials of that move.
I think you've already got the basics of that move. I said it yesterday too. Kongu K is a very simple K technique. If you just memorize the technique, you'll be able to do it very quickly. But to use it correctly is a different thing.
That's why we have to.
That's why, just by memorizing, you cannot understand the true nature of Kongu K.
Asserted Layfon, and Nina closed her mouth.
Concentration isn't something which will be easily trained, and if you want to be able to bring out Kongu K's original use, raising your basic abilities is very important. And if your foundations are very strong, then your overall abilities will be raised as well. No matter how you look at it, isn't it very good?
As he said this, Layfon walked towards one side of the room and started to prepare for training. Nina watched Layfon's back quietly.
Layfon seemed even further from Nina. Nina only saw the platoon match before her, and a bit further away, the intercity battle. But Layfon looked even further, thinking of doing battle with filth monsters. This was the original purpose of military artists, right? She knew that it was the military artist's job to fight the filth monsters that attacked the city. But the intercity battles with other academy cities, the battle with other military artists from other cities was unavoidable.
Then what am I supposed to do about that area? Wah!
Halfway in her sentence, Nina fell backwards to the floor and frowned. On the ground, many balls the size of fists rolled around. These were things that Nina had bought with the platoon's budget according to Layfon's request.
But that sort of thing is perfectly normal for military artists.
The two were practicing their stances on top of the rolling balls. As they practiced the basics of being aware of K within their weapons, they had to be careful of the balls they were stepping on and insert K into the balls to stop them from rolling. If it was just standing on the balls, even Nina could do it as she was right now. But to do it as she was practicing her stances was very hard. As she continued to step on the balls and adjust her stances, she had to use her nerves to adjust the direction of the K flow.
Indeed, battling with filth monsters is different from fighting other military artists, but the only difference is the fighting methods, as the essence of the K technique hasn't changed.
Nina moved about slowly, while Layfon leisurely stepped between poses. The balls he stepped on didn't move at all. Seeing this, Nina realized just how great the gap between herself and Layfon was.
Let's just use Kongu K as an example. You don't know how strong your opponent's attack will be. You don't know how much power you need to defend against the attack. For argument's sake, you don't even know who your opponent is. Even with your standards now, you might still run into some trouble. But in order to get the greatest result, isn't it better to be working hard for that? You'll never waste hard work.
Speaking of which, are you practicing properly right now?
I am. Wouldn't you say that I am doing training very seriously?
You're actually holding back to coordinate with me, right?
I haven't actually thought about that.
Being asked that question all of a sudden by Nina, Layfon scratched his face uneasily.
Well, I certainly wouldn't do this in individual training, and this place isn't a specialized facility, so I can't do it properly. So doing this seems a lot more appropriate,
said Layfon, balancing on a ball with a single leg. Seeing this change, Nina observed Layfon's feet. The K rotated around Layfon in a whirl. The first thing that Layfon had taught Nina was how to observe an opponent's K. As she observes the movements of the body, she also has to capture the flow of her opponent's K. If she did that before her opponent used any move, she would be able to detect any changes in the flow of his K. She could nearly do it, but she didn't understand it. If she could see the flow of the K, then as her opponent used any techniques, she would also be able to see the change in the flow.
Even though she understood this, that's all she could do. If she reproduced the flow of K, in theory, she could use the same technique, but she couldn't do it in reality.
Ah, it's true. Layfon was full of unbelievable aspects to him. Geniuses were hard to understand in the first place. And Nina herself was a rare student who was made a platoon member as a first year. So many people around her might think she was a genius as well, but she wanted to deny it. She didn't actually think that she was a genius. All she did was work harder than people expected her to. Even though she always felt that no matter how much she did, she was always short of something, she still kept on working hard. Layfon easily reached a level she could never reach no matter how hard she worked. Even if that was the case, when people praised him, he accepted it unenthusiastically. He thought that it was something that was perfectly normal. He was a little proud. After Layfon had taught her the basics to K, she felt it even more. Layfon was filled with an even greater aura that made everything he did seem perfectly natural for everyone else. Of course he would be like that. Of course, he could do it all. He never thought that he wouldn't be able to achieve anything. If someone did point out a problem, he wouldn't accept it, as if he lost to someone else.
Perhaps Layfon was also aware that the things that he told others to do were a little difficult for them. That's what Nina felt.
She couldn't complete the exercises Layfon had set for her, but she wouldn't feel impatient. She wouldn't start yelling curses at herself. Even though he was proud, he wasn't indifferent. It really is, Nina mumbled again to herself in her heart, and then she renewed her training with the stances. He was a hopeless genius, hopelessly proud, and hopelessly gentle. When that bit of gentleness wasn't seen in his military arts, his whole being would seem completely unreliable, but when he did show it, it made one's chest feel tight just like that.
That sort of change was completely unbelievable. It seemed difficult to accept. Why? Is it like this? Inadvertently thinking of this, Nina shook her head, trying to chase the thought out of her head.
Now wasn't the time to be thinking about those things. Why did Layfon make others think like this? It really is unbelievable, and it really does make people angry. I guess I'll try and see, thought Nina. No matter what, she wanted to try it out. No matter what it was that she could learn from him, she would try and learn it. In order for her to protect the city, she had to turn his power into her own. Remembering the cries of the evil beast, Nina was so terrified she nearly lost it.
Nina.
After leaving the training area, Nina and Layfon walked towards the nearby shopping street. They had agreed earlier that they would go to a military arts specialist store and have a look around. They needed to resupply on the anti-slip perishables, as well as look at some other methods of training. They were nearly at the large store when she was stopped by a call from Selena. And then, there was that evil monster's cry.
Why did you bring that to this kind of place?
Nina protested with an expression of terror. The devil's spawn named Steven was running around Selena in circles.
Replied Selena awkwardly as she stood in front of a pet store.
Selena smiled at Nina teasingly. As she said this, Nina finally realized the situation that she was in.
That,
Layfon's awkward face was just in front of her.
Wait.
Noticing that she was tightly holding on to Layfon, she suddenly let go with a shriek. Her cheeks were burning hot. She knew that right now her face was probably beet red.
It's totally not what you think.
Even as she said that, with a red face, Selena pretended not to hear.
She forced the large paper bag she was holding onto Nina, and then leading Steven along, she walked away.
Wait!
We have to buy things as well. Even though she wanted to say this, she knew that Selena wouldn't listen to what others say, and she was also slightly afraid of Steven, so she was unable to put up a more demanding front.
Do you hate animals?
Layfon asked Nina as her extended hand dropped powerlessly to her side.
It's not like that.
Looking at Selena's gradually shrinking shadow, her shoulders dropped powerlessly as well. Other than shake her head and helplessly, Nina couldn't do anything. As a result, they had so many things that she was forced to ask for Layfon's help to carry it. No, it wasn't that Nina bought a lot of things, but it was Selena who actually bought too much.
She didn't think of the consequences at all. Jeez.
Nina complained quietly, walking towards her dorm. Even though this sort of thing happened, she still felt a little annoyed.
Today was really way too strange. She felt like she couldn't control her mood properly. Layfon followed silently behind her. Layfon was holding what Selena bought for Steven. They didn't know what was inside, but it was surprising that to keep Steven she would need such a large thing. Layfon noticed where Nina was looking. She was looking his way. The thing wasn't really heavy for a military artist, but it was still pretty big. Before she had seen through the thin gap in the paper bag, Layfon looked over and she turned around immediately. After they arrived at the dorm, she placed the stuff they bought in the kitchen while Layfon sat in the drawing room waiting. Nina returned to her own room. As she changed into her casual clothes, she thought about making some tea for Layfon. The snack Selena had baked a couple of days ago still had many left over. As she was changing, she couldn't help it and she started humming. She looked beside her bed. Her bed was placed beside the wall, and next to it there was a windowsill. On the windowsill, Nina had left some miscellaneous items she had as a girl there as a decoration. In the middle, there was something that felt different from normal. It was a blank, white space. There was a strange feeling.
Why?
She stopped humming. Something that was meant to be there was gone. She realized instantly that something was gone, that she was missing something. Thinking this, she calmly organized her memories again, and she looked around her room with a tense expression. It really was gone. Mitesha was gone. Nina was feeling slightly dizzy, and she held on to the side of her desk to stop herself from falling over.
Why?
Still carrying a feeling of uncertainty, Nina put on a serious expression as she went through her memories again. This morning, her day had been completely messed up by that devil Steven. But before that, as Nina woke up, she had placed Matesha in his special place. After that, what happened after that? Even though she wasn't too sure, but she couldn't remember moving Matesha. She still remembered that to escape Steven, she ran out of the room and quickly changed and left the dorm. What did she do at that time? No, Matesha should still be in the same spot. She couldn't answer that question with her memories, which meant that something happened when Nina wasn't in the room. It was impossible for her to have moved Matesha, so something or someone had moved her poor panda plushie. As Nina was thinking about this, there was a light knocking sound at the door.
Senpai?
On the other side of the door was Layfon's voice. Right now, Nina didn't have any time to spare to worry about Layfon.
I really am an idiot.
Making a cold sound that surprised even herself, Nina looked up. Layfon had opened the door and was looking over at her with surprise.
Poor Matesha. I just left him there and went out. I bet he hates me now.
That senpai.
She understood that Layfon was calling to her, but if she didn't get her conclusion off her chest, she couldn't calm down.
I really am an idiot. At that time, how horrified must he have been as he saw his own death nearing. Even if it was like that, I still fell to my own fear and left him behind and ran away myself. It's perfectly normal for me to be hated now.
Senpai? Hello?
Mitesha couldn't move, so he lost his life and departed. I have to do everything in my power. If I don't correct my mistakes, yes. If I don't do that,
Senpai, please return to Earth now.
As he said this, Layfon gradually got further away from Nina. Nina was probably blaming herself for not taking responsibility.
but Matesha hasn't returned, has he?
I have to do it.
Do what?
Letting out a miserable cry, Nina had already lost all signs of answering Layfon.
A completely carefree voice came from downstairs. It was Selena. That means if Selena was here, that was here as well.
Coming.
As Nina muttered to herself, she pushed Layfon out of the way and ran towards the front door.
At the front door, Selena was carrying Steven, who was testing his claws and looking around the room. There was nobody on the first floor. Selena had already forgotten that Nina was afraid of Steven. No, she actually thought that because of how cute the little thing was, that they definitely could make it up to each other and have a good relationship. Selena thought of this as she heard footsteps upstairs.
Smiling like always, Selena was waving at Nina, then she froze. Nina walked out with a scary expression on her face. For some reason, she was holding a pair of restored dites, metal whips.
While she was still mumbling to herself, stunned, Nina had already walked over in front of her. She didn't have time to be afraid. She stood up immediately, but as soon as she did, she got knocked over by a strong blast of wind.
What are you doing?
This time the person crying out was Layfon. Why are you getting in my way? Nina's eyes were shining fiercely. Using his sword, he pushed back the metal whips, Layfon's back shaking slightly. Nina's whole body was overflowing with K, like a broken pipe. Even her breathing was mingled with K, as if she was fighting some monstrous being from a nightmare.
Saying that I'm in your way?
Layfon was shaking slightly as he replied.
If I don't do this, Matesha won't return.
So that's why I'm asking. Who is he?
Shut up!
Nina roared as she rushed and pushed Layfon out of the way, getting closer to Selena yet again. The target was the ferret Selena was holding on to.
I'm gonna take you down. I'm gonna take back Matesha.
I can't take it anymore.
Layfon went and whacked Nina's completely open back. He wanted to knock her out with that blow, so he adjusted his power accordingly. Nina was sent flying by this K-filled attack, and she landed outside in the front garden. Seeing Nina down, Layfon frowned. A military artist should be fine after that, but being forced to hit his senpai left a bad aftertaste in his mouth.
What's wrong?
Asking Selena, who stood there stunned, staring at the fallen Nina. The ferret she was holding in her arms was fidgeting a lot.
Mitesha? Mitesha is...
Just as Selena was about to answer, Layfon felt a killing intent bubbling out from Nina.
Is it...
It really is. Nina, who was supposed to be knocked out, stood up again, and she was still releasing K like before.
I'm sure I hit you with my K.
Why? As he was thinking, Layfon realized something.
Kongu K? Is it? Successful? At this sort of time? In these circumstances? No way!
Facing Nina, who was releasing a bestial killing intent and slowly closing in, Layfon felt somewhat powerless instead of nervous. How to say it? He wasn't exactly happy with the fact that Nina had grasped the technique he had taught her. Layfon had also experienced times where he couldn't use a technique but suddenly used it under pressure, but never in a situation like this.
Return him!
Nina spoke in a human language, her two eyes drilling into the ferret. Stephen leaped out of Selena's arms.
Trying to run!
Nina started to run, chasing after Stephen, who escaped from the front door into the front yard. Looking like she suddenly remembered something, Selena went to chase after Nina and the ferret, whose traces had since disappeared.
I am going to take back Metesha!
That's why I'm asking, who the hell is he?
There weren't many people about at dusk, so Nina and Layfon's shouts reverberated in the air. As the sun began to set, Loy returned from the library, saw the front door wide open, and scowled.
Leo went into the dorm shouting, "Be a bit more careful next time," but nobody replied. Such a worrisome thing as this must have been caused by Selena. She probably got carried away since Nina agreed to let her keep the ferret. If she didn't remind her properly, as she grumbled away to herself, she walked up to her room.
Remembering something, Loy went downstairs, into the drawing room. Both their common room and their drawing room were filled with piles of magazines the three bought. Loy picked up the plushie, which was placed in the corner of the sofa. Saying this to the panda plushie, she walked upstairs. After Nina left, Selena and Lou wanted to see if Stephen could actually catch mice, and placed him up in a place where there might be a nest in the ceiling. Even though he was surprisingly successful, Stephen was treating catching mice like a game. With the ferret showing off his live catches to Leo in a self-satisfied manner, Leo could only sigh in resignation. Well, he did manage to catch the mice. Selena also said happily, "Like this, I'm sure Nina will accept Stephen now." But what would the final result be?
Well, why was Metesha in the drawing room? As they were looking for a way to get up into the ceiling from the second floor, they found that they could only go up to the ceiling from Nina's room.
Even though Selena had the master key to all the rooms in the dorm, but she was still a bit guilty about just going into someone else's room, and she was going to bring a ferret which Nina hated into her room. Remembering Metesha and Nina's tragic past, they didn't want to put Metesha with the ferret even for a second. That's why Leo placed Metesha into the drawing room with good intentions. But she ended up forgetting him there.
For some reason, the door to Nina's room was wide open, and placing Metesha back into the room, Loy could only respond to her stomach's complaint with a sigh.
What's wrong, Layfon?
I can't take it anymore. Why did I have to teach you this move?
As he fought Nina with his sword in the air, Layfon complained with remorse. Said Selena, on the verge of tears. By the time her words reached Nina's ears, it was because Nina was down on the ground with fatigue from using too much K, and night had long fallen. From then on, whenever Stephen saw Nina, he would escape at lightning speed. Speaking objectively, this was a very strange occurrence.
Interlude 03.
Speaking of which, there are normally a lot of people who take care of us.
Huh? Oh, you mean Mei Shen and them, right?
Yeah, what kind of people are they?
The three of them seem like childhood friends. They were all born in the transport city. You've been there too, right?
Oh, yes. But I stayed for just under 3 days.
Yeah, and the lodging facilities are the best.
That's right. Still, what kind of people are they?
You might have already seen Naruki because she's in one of the platoons.
That person with the tan skin?
Yeah, that's her. She's also part of the city police. Mifi is a very open girl, and she works at the journalism department.
As for Meishin, even though I know her pretty well, cooking. If it's one thing I have to say about her cooking, it's her dessert. She's very good at making sweets.
Oh? And all your desserts and snacks were made by her?
Yeah, but it's just that I don't really like eating sweets.
Same. I don't eat too much stuff with a lot of sugar in it. But you're licking a lollipop right now.
But still, I need my sugar.
Yeah. Father used to say that if two people licked a lollipop at the same time, it would bring about hatred.
Why would he say that?
Then, do you refuse to eat her sweets?
No, sometimes I eat them as well. I'm eating a controlled amount of sugar.
Huh?
Meishin is a really nice person, and when I was really busy, she made me bentos for lunch.
Wait for me.
Innocence wander.
The bell that signaled the end of classes was also a signal for the start of yet another battle. The start of the lunch break was also the starting pistol of the race between military artists for lunch.
The ordinary students who didn't want to go to the cafeteria could easily buy lunch by asking students in the military arts department to buy it for them. Thus, the military artists charged out of the classroom simultaneously as the classes ended, flying towards the canteen. Occasionally, even the older students who were teaching those classes would also join the fray, so naturally, nobody tried to stop them. Of course, if public property was damaged or if people started fighting and were caught by the city guards, they would be punished. Having nothing to do with that storm-like event, Layfon leisurely walked to the nearest park. Inside the park, there was a small pavilion with a table, and it was a very suitable place for lunch.
Is there anything special going on today?
Layfon stared at the food on the table. Although he already thought the bento he was carrying in the basket today was excessively large, he never thought that what it contained was also incredibly luxurious, and the effort put into making it was different from normal as well.
It's not like that.
Quietly replied Mei Shen as she lowered her head, blushing.
Hey, as long as I can eat great food, it's all good.
Okay.
Although Naruki and Mifi were with Mei Shen all the time, they didn't know why Mei Shen put in so much effort today. For some reason, Mei Shen seemed a little strange today. But right now the atmosphere made it seem hardly appropriate to ask what's wrong, so Layfon began to eat silently.
Recently, this phrase had continually appeared in Mei Shen's mind. Heaven's Blade Successor. She knew that it was a phrase whose meaning represented something superior. That was why she was so concerned with it. To a passerby who had no idea of what was going on, the easiest solution would be to ask the person directly. But no matter what she did, Mei Shen couldn't bring herself to ask Layfon. That was because it was a phrase that appeared in a letter privately addressed to Layfon. That letter was accidentally placed together with other letters for Mei Shen, which explained why she had it. Although she immediately realized that this letter was delivered to the wrong place, why did it have to be delivered to her mailbox? Mei Shen thought silently, resenting this fact. Of course, Mei Shen couldn't just go and ask Layfon about a word appearing in a letter addressed to him that she couldn't have ever heard of or seen before. Moreover, Mei Shen hadn't apologized to Layfon for peeking at the letter and had completely missed the best chance to ask him about it. And who was the person who wrote the letter to Layfon? A girl named Liren. Although she wanted to find out, it was difficult for Mei Shen to open her mouth and ask. She was afraid of asking. The only thing that was clear was that this girl named Liren knew the Layfon from before Zuellni very well. Without knowing why, Mei Shen felt very discontent.
Have you heard of the phrase, Heaven's Blade Successor?
Instead, Mei Shen decided to ask the people who were beside her in the dormitory's shared kitchen. In order to live together in the student dormitory, Mei Shen, Naruki, and Mifi shared this 3-bedroom and 1 dining room dorm. Because they had been best friends since childhood, they were comfortable with each other. Mei Shen really liked this sense of spaciousness in the kitchen.
Heaven's Blade Successor. What's that?
Mifi was stuffing her face with Mei Shen's cake as she tilted her head, asking.
I think it's a phrase referring to a military artist.
Mei Shen without much confidence. She then imitated Mifi, and together they began to stare silently at Naruki. Layfon was a military artist, so this phrase must be specifically referring to something about them. Naruki, who was also a military artist, was the most likely out of them to know what the term meant.
Heaven's Blade. I haven't heard of it before.
Seeing Naruki shaking her head, Mei Shen lowered her head in disappointment. However, Naruki seemed to have remembered something.
A person who received the Heaven's Blade, right? It really is a pretentious name, but at least it isn't as absurd as the Joldum's Knights of the Crossroad. Well, every city has its own customs when referring to military artists, so I think Heaven's Blade something is just another nickname for them.
That's...
Well, the only one that could catch your interest would be that one.
And plus the phrase is about military artists.
That's...
There really is only one. We can't be wrong.
Well, tilde, let's go to the library tomorrow.
Oh, it sounds interesting.
Then do you want to go to the library together?
If there is time.
Mi-chan is a bit of a workaholic.
Looking at the 2 people who had made a decision on their own and ignored her, Mei Shen sighed in silence as their conversation drifted further and further away from their original discussion.
How's it going?
Asked Mei Shen as Mifi stared at the screen, humming.
I still haven't found it.
Really?
Naruki, who was standing behind them, leaned over for a closer look.
Then what about places other than Grendon?
I thought about this too, so I tried it as well, but there were no results either.
Naruki scratched her head, thinking.
How about asking Layfon himself?
That's...
We can't? I think that's the easiest way to find out.
It's best if we don't.
Well...
Since Mei Shen knew Mifi was trying to help, she just silently nodded. After classes on the next day, the 3 friends began their journey towards the military arts department. The moment Mai Shen stepped into the entrance, a painful memory surfaced in her mind, and she stopped moving.
Eh? What's wrong?
Nothing.
Shaking her head, Mei Shen recalled the time when she stood here agonizing over whether or not she should give Layfon the letter that was accidentally sent to her. If she hadn't met Feli here, what might have happened? She still wouldn't have had the confidence to give it back to him as if nothing had happened. Anyway, recently she had been incessantly gloomy about the contents of the letter. Mei Shen felt that the consequences of her mistakes had begun to get out of hand.
Let's go.
Naruki held out her hand to an anguished Mei Shen.
Even though I don't know exactly what you are thinking about, if you want to find out, we have to get moving. Just like how you decided to work at the bakery store before.
Naruki held out her hand sincerely, and that look in her eyes reflected the same warmth and sincerity.
Okay.
Quietly nodding, Mei Shen grasped the offered hand.
We have to interview 4 platoons today, and the first is the first platoon.
Although the military artist's grounds seemed very large from the outside, it was in reality divided up by various screens into a multitude of small areas on the inside. The streets were very narrow and some seemed like they were squashed in a gap between buildings. Mei Shen and her friends lost their way several times before finally arriving at their destination.
Hello, everyone.
Mei Shen became nervous when she felt Mifi's voice penetrate the soundproof walls that divided the area. The walls vibrated at her voice. As soon as the door was open, sound waves even louder than before hit Mei Shen's eardrums. This noise subsided with Mifi's continued greeting. The sudden silence frightened Mei Shen and she gradually edged her body behind Naruki. Mei Shen thought that her weakness was lamentable, but Mifi stood there without wavering in the slightest.
I'm a reporter from the Weekly Lookin' magazine here for the interview. First-year general arts student Miffy Rotten, and these are my friends.
Taking a towel from a woman who seemed to be supervising, the tall student wiped his sweat and made his way over. He was the commander of the first platoon, Vance Haldy. As he stroked his beard, his penetrating gaze examined Mei Shen and her friends. He directed the second half of his sentence to the platoon members. After they replied in unison, the platoon members continued with their training. Mei Shen and the others followed this tall man who exuded dignity completely unlike any other student into the lounge room.
Reddish bronze skin, 2 wriggling silkworm eyebrows, his clearly delineated face and his sloppy beard. It seemed like he embodied both good and evil with his outward appearance, although it didn't seem like he was an evil person.
That's because Vance had the role of representing all of the students in the military arts department. He was the head of military arts.
Okay.
Just like that, under intense scrutiny, even the brave Mifi couldn't help but cringe a little.
Oh, then I'll begin the interview. The inter-platoon matches have gone on for nearly half a year. Up to now, how do you feel about them? For example, how you felt about some of the more difficult opponents, or if the first platoon is currently in its peak condition, or things like that. Really? Okay, then how good do you think your platoon is? It really is tough. Then how do you see the other platoons? And are there any platoons that seem strong to you? The 5th, 10th, and 17th platoons are the ones which have won multiple times. What do you think of the 17th squad?
Hearing Mifi ask that question, Mei Shen immediately became perturbed and couldn't stay calm. It was the platoon Layfon was in. Mei Shen was very concerned with how others viewed Layfon, and she wanted to know what the first squad commander thought.
On the topic of the 17th platoon, how good is that well-known attacker Layfon?
Hearing Layfon being praised by the strongest person in the military arts department, Mei Shen felt very happy.
Is that so? Then I wish you the best. Thank you for accepting our interview.
Mifi hurriedly nodded and bowed, Mei Shen and Naruki quickly following suit. Vance nodded, preparing to leave the lounge room.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Mifi spoke as if suddenly remembering something.
I want to ask you something. Is that okay? Have you heard of the phrase, Heaven's Blade Successor? Oh, it's a rarely used term that I don't understand. I think maybe that as the head of military arts, you might know something about it.
Seeing hope radiating from the look on Mifi's face, Vance answered with a stiff expression, turned and left without looking back.
It seems like he knew something, eh?
Yeah, even though he knew he hid it from us.
Why? Mei Shen felt a little insecure. Why did Vance not tell them what he knew but hid it instead? Doesn't that mean he didn't want anybody to know what a Heaven's Blade successor was? Completely different from Mei Shen's reaction. Mifi's eyes lit up, showing a look of curiosity.
Trying to hide it from me only made me want to know it more.
No comment.
If it's like this, then we'll go and ask some other people. Okay, let's go.
What Naruki said to Mifi obviously didn't register as she stood up with her face full of determination. Meishin was beginning to feel less and less secure.
The next place Miffy had to go to was the 10th platoon. As before, Miffy knocked the door with uncertainty, and the person who welcomed them was filled with the grace of three people, a woman of great beauty.
After being led to the lounge room yet again, Mifi began her interview. This beauty's name was Dalshina Che Matelna, and it seems that she was the vice captain of the 10th platoon. Her golden long curls of hair overshadowed the lights in the room, dulling them. Wearing altered fighting gear and a cloak with red texture matching its white lining, she was clothed like a knight.
I'm very sorry, but please be brief.
Okay.
Against her icy cold demeanor, Mifi couldn't hold her ground.
After successfully qualifying for the inter-platoon matches, how do you see your position right now?
Obviously, I have things I am dissatisfied with, but it's true that the platoon is in great condition when they battle. I hope that we can maintain this state for the proper battle.
Out of all the platoons, which one do you think is the strongest?
The first platoon. The head of military arts, Vance's strong and indestructible fighting style is truly fearsome. The members of the platoon are well suited to that fighting style and aren't bad either.
The other platoons who have qualified include the 5th and the 17th platoon. What do you think of them?
The 5th platoon's main strength lies in Gornio and Shante's carrying attack. Gornio's alchemy attacks aren't as easy to use as you make them out to be. Gornio's rational thinking and Shante's use of her instincts form a fearsome combination. The thing is, you could probably estimate the limit of their combat powers.
Then what about the 17th platoon?
As for their main offensive force, Layfon, the limit to his power is unfathomable. Even strong individuals like the head of military arts, Vance, could be no match for him. But that's all there is to that platoon. Even if he took on the whole of the opposing platoon alone, that won't change the fact that he is only one person. The only reason for their recent victories is because he has been able to smooth out results with his individual performance. Other than that, there is nothing noteworthy about that platoon.
Thank you very much for your cooperation. Then, I still have one last question which is unrelated to this interview. Have you heard of the phrase Heaven's Blade successor?
Heaven's Blade? No, I haven't. Where did the term originate?
I think it came from Grendon.
Then I think you'd better find Gornio, because that's where his hometown was.
Really? Thank you so much.
Don't worry about it. You guys are working hard as well. The military artists are doing it in their own way, and so are you guys doing the best to make sure our city can keep on existing.
After the interview, Dalshina's cold expression was like frost that had finally melted, revealing a warm smile. Watching her pure and radiant smile, Meishin and the others couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief, gazing at Dalshina's back as it receded into the distance.
Ooh, she was so cool.
Yeah, how do I describe her? She's such a noble person.
Yeah.
The three girls stood there in a dreamlike trance, looking in the direction in which Dalshina left.
I heard that Dalshina-san was the eldest daughter of Yahemu. He is the head of the city of Iverin.
Really?
So that's why. It seems to explain her grandeur.
I can't put my finger on it, but she really is cool.
Yeah, she is.
But I didn't know you knew that kind of stuff as well.
I know a little about her. Dalshina-san even has her own fan club. The amount of detail in those fan club reports of hers almost goes overboard.
It might not be a good idea, but I feel like reading the contents of that report.
Do you want me to bring it next time?
No thanks. I'll give that a pass.
As the three continued with their conversation, they couldn't get over their uncontrollable emotion. It was overwhelming.
Next up was the 5th platoon. The three girls who were wrapped up by Dalshina's graceful air floated to their next destination and were led to the same lounge room for the interview.
This time they chatted to more than one person. The captain of the 5th platoon, Gornio Luckens, was a tall man with a bulky stature comparable to that of the head of military arts, Vance. His body was completely bound with muscle, and his robust neck supported a large head, which he held with a serious manner. Instead, the face reflected an affable expression, leaving a cute impression of the giant. That impression was further reinforced by the presence of a young girl tightly holding onto his shoulders. The red-haired girl distinctly contrasted with Gornio. With a staunch little face, a petite frame, and her headstrong personality and inability to shoulder any responsibility, she gave off the impression of childishness. Nevertheless, This young girl was actually a fifth-year student at Zuellni, and she was about 20 years old. Her name was Shante Late, and she was the vice captain of the 5th platoon.
Are you okay with that?
Shante was in a bad mood and was swiping at Gorno's head continually.
It's okay. It happens all the time.
Gornio calmly answered Mifi's question. Meishan timidly glanced at Shante, and Shante immediately growled at her with a grr.
Still not going to stop?
Even though she was trapped by Gorneo's huge knuckles, Shante had no intention of stopping. However, she suddenly stopped. After wriggling her nose several times, Shante used her legs and, clinging onto Gorneo's head, she leant closer to Mei Shen.
That.
You smell nice.
Huh?
Ah, that's because Meishan likes cooking.
Yeah, there's a nice smell on her body.
Ah.
Seeing Shante rapidly sniffing the air, Meishan took out a paper bag from her school bag, and that was the leftover cookies.
There's only these left.
Is it for me?
If you want them.
Meishan put the cookies on the table. Shante leapt off Gorneo's shoulders and went to Meishan. She then started eating the cookies without a word.
I'm sorry.
Gornio lowered his head in apology.
Oh, no, not at all.
She's lived in the wild for too long.
Even though she didn't know what was going on.
Then, can we start now?
Shante was eating the cookies voraciously, next to Meishan. Mifi felt at a loss for what to do, but decided to push on with the interview.
After qualifying in the inter-platoon matches as a captain, are you pleased with your team's performance?
If I were pleased so easily, then everything would be finished by now. It's because we know what we are lacking that we feel unsatisfied.
Are there any platoons that you are especially concerned about?
I want to learn the 1st platoon's stable command that can react to any scenario with creative versatility and the individual strengths of each member. They are the role models my platoon is striving for.
Which platoons you think you should watch out for in the future?
All of them, but the most dangerous is still the 1st platoon. If we can't beat the 1st platoon, then it signifies that we cannot beat the previous generation of Zuellni. If there is no change from 2 years ago, then the results will be the same as 2 years ago as well.
Gornio's words carried a somber tone through his gloomy speech. 2 years ago, before Meishan arrived at Zuellni, Zuellni suffered a heavy defeat in the intercity battle.
Now, Zuellni had only one selenium mine left, leaving them no choice of retreat. They must not lose. In Gornio's words, one could hear this determination resounding firmly. Along with his beliefs, the same conviction echoed in Vance and Dalshina's words. At this moment, that was what Meishan felt. Normal students could never feel that heavy burden. Whether it was studying, working at night, or playing around, female students following fashion trends while male students played various ball sports, or movie stars and singers that were common interests of both sexes, they made up everything in a normal student's life. Even Meishan, who could live happily as long as Naruki and Mifi were by her side, felt that the peaceful classroom atmosphere was very interesting as she looked from afar. On the other side, the world was like that. This was also Zuellni, Academy City, Zuellni. A city with only students, it was a gathering ground for people to grow, and they had to use their own abilities to make the information they gathered into their knowledge. There were no adults acting as protectors. If it was your world, you had to protect it on your own. This city was a place like that. Right now, she felt that heavy burden. Even within the resting rooms you could hear it, and echoing along the dividing walls of the military arts area, the striking sounds of each platoon let the world feel that heavy burden. As long as you understood the true meaning of that heavy, heavy sound, you would never forget it. This resolution and will to fight rang out as thunderous crashes in the training complex for Zuellni to see.
Thank you for accepting our interview.
Mifi continued the interview and seemed to have finished it as Meishan sat there blankly, swallowed up by the sound of training.
Before you go, can I ask a question?
Shanty was licking the crumbs off the biscuit wrapper.
Yes?
Gorneo picked her up in one movement and held that position as he replied to Mifi.
Have you heard of the phrase Heaven's Blade Successor?
Where did you hear this?
We heard it by chance, and other people we asked said it was a phrase originating from Grendon, so I thought that Gornio-senpai, since you were born in Grendon, would know what it means.
It's a journey and a goal.
Huh?
Almost everything in the world is like that. Some are driven by what they want but do not have, and for others, it is necessity that leads them to their goal. Only by achieving those goals can we continue to move forward, and if we do not continue to do so, then we have reached the destination, the summit of the peak. The Heaven's Blade successor is one of those peak. Perhaps people who know of that phrase wish to attain that rank, or perhaps they must. Yet if they do not know of it at all, then they can never aim for it in the beginning. If you don't really want it, if you don't really believe that you need it, then your lack of interest will hold you back, and where you are standing will be your final destination.
Finishing his speech, Gorneo turned his back to Mei Shen and the others. Shante climbed up along his arm, settling down onto his shoulders, but she continued to stare at Mei Shen.
What's your name?
Huh? Oh, Mei Shen.
Meishan, is it? Thank you. You really are a nice person.
Don't swindle anyone else out of their cookies.
Bye-bye.
Shante pretended not to understand what Gorneo was saying and waved. A glowing smile spread across Mei Shen's face as she weakly waved back.
Mifi released the breath that she had been holding for the whole time in a large sigh.
Jeez, it felt like I stepped on a filth monster's tail.
Yeah, and we can't ask Gorneo-senpai about it anymore, seeing as how he's already sealed his lips.
Yeah, that means the only person left is...
The two of them turned and looked at Mei Shen, and she knew what they wanted to say. Compared to asking any other people born in Grendon, there was another, much easier way to find out, but Mei Shen couldn't do it.
It was only because she couldn't do it that Gorneo thought they were nuisances. Vance looked like he didn't want to tell anyone either. Just what is going on? Mei Shen felt very uneasy. Just what did the phrase Heaven's Blade successor entail?
Well, the last platoon we are supposed to be interviewing is the 17th platoon.
Mei Shen's expression instantly stiffened. Mei Shen murmured quietly like she would an apology.
There's no way out. The magazine had planned to make an article about all the platoons that performed well in the inter-platoon matches.
She knocked on the door of the 17th platoon and held onto the door handle at the same time.
Hello, everyone.
In response to Miffy's cheery greeting, the door swung open. Her voice echoed within the room. This room was originally very quiet, but shouts from within that could match those yelling in training exploded across it, making it seem a little out of place. Embarrassed by this unexpected situation, even Miffy couldn't stop her face turning red as she turned into a statue.
Ayaya? Mifi? And why did you guys come?
From inside the room came Layfon's voice.
What exactly are you guys doing?
Mifi asked, puzzled. Since she was standing in the doorway, Mei Shen, who couldn't see what was going on, stood on her toes to look inside. Inside the room, hard metallic balls were rolling all over the
Oh, we're training.
Is that so?
Layfon, Nina, and Sharnid were standing on the metallic balls which were rolling all over the place, while Feli expressed no interest as she sat aside on a seat reading a book, although standing on continually rolling balls was by no means an easy feat.
Wow, that's amazing! Is that for practicing balance?
You're partially correct. This is a K exercise, and through controlling the flow of the internal type K, we aim to control the body's balance, and at the same time we try to use external type K to keep the balls stationary.
As Layfon answered Mifi's question, he waved his dike downwards at his feet a couple of times. Naruki's eyes widened as she saw the ease with which Layfon moved about on the balls while waving his dike around.
So the interviewers are you guys?
Mina, who was also standing on the metallic balls, asked in surprise.
Yes, that's me. I'm the reporter from Weekly Look-ins.
It must have been a busy day. Then, shall we begin?
Don't we need to go somewhere else?
No, just here is fine.
That's right. An interview with me, the most handsome man in Zuellni, is something that happens once in a lifetime. So I should treat you guys to a drink. Layfon, quick, go get some drinks for these ladies.
Sharnid leapt off the metallic balls lightly, landing in front of Mifi and her friends. Sharnid tossed a coin. Highing, Layfon caught it in one hand and was about to go to the vending machine when...
Let me help.
Mei Shen followed Layfon to the vending machine.
I'm sorry.
The soft drink cans dropped from the vending machine with a bump. Layfon picked up the soft drink cans. The finger that selected the fruit juices did not hesitate, and it seemed that Layfon had already figured out the tastes of everyone in the platoon. This was proven by how he asked what flavor Mei Shen wanted, and she felt a little disappointed.
I came without asking for your permission.
That's nothing to be worrying about since we were going to have a break anyway.
Layfon carried the cans for everyone and stood up. And after Mei Shen asked that she carry half, Layfon gave her the cans that she, Mifi, and Naruki had asked for. It was a rare opportunity for the two of them to be together without anyone else. Yet, she couldn't think of anything to say, so she could only follow Layfon in silence. She gazed at the back of Layfon as he walked ahead of her. It was his back, the back that had protected her at the opening ceremony of the school. At the time, in that long line of people, a disturbance suddenly caused everyone to start pushing and shoving, and in the mess of it all, a surprised Meishan had slipped and fallen over. If she had stayed like that any longer, she would have been injured by the stampede of the crowd. It was at that time that Layfon had saved her, brushing aside the swarms of people and pulling her back to her feet, stopping her from being trampled to death. That might have just been a coincidence. Even so, she could not forget the back that had protected her. Heaven's blade successor. That was Layfon's past, and she wanted to know what it meant. If she were asked why she wanted to know so badly, then her only reason would be that she wanted to understand more about Layfon. Meishan couldn't think of any other reasons as to why she wanted to know. After she looked at his letter without his permission, she had felt guilty. And as for the fragments of his past mentioned in the letter, did her simple desire to know merit her attempt at digging out all the information she could? Meishan didn't know how to answer. She was also guilty about not asking Layfon directly, but instead asking others to gather information about him. Meishan didn't know whether what she was doing was right or wrong, but she really wanted to know. Losing her chance for apologies, she decided to remain silent and stop thinking about the person named Liren, the person who wrote that letter. Liren was in Grendon and Layfon was in Zuellni. If he could successfully graduate from here, then Meishan was in Zuellni. If he could successfully graduate from here, then Meishan would have 6 whole years with him.
May?
Layfon turned his head in surprise, staring at Meishan, who was standing rooted to the floor.
Sorry about that.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
She replied, shaking her head. Meishan didn't want Layfon to see her expression right now, so she lowered her head.
She suddenly understood what she really wanted to do. No, that wasn't it. She already knew what it was. In fact, she should have found out a long time ago. Even though she realized, she tried to not think about it, because that was the only way she could avoid reality. She really was a terrible person. Meishan had 6 years, and those 6 years was time that Liren would never have with Layfon. She turned this into an advantage and accepted it. Advantage? This word was suggestive of a scheme. It was perfunctory, ugly, and terrible beyond comparison. Herself that thought to take advantage of that was too ugly. Why would Meishan think like that? That left her disappointed and anxious. She was attracted by that back which had once protected her and was now in front of her eyes. There was a person who knew that back a long time ago. There was a girl who understood the Layfon from before Zuellni very well. Every time she thought of that, she couldn't bear it. The advantage that Meishan had thought of was just something that she had come up with after intense thought about this issue. Even though she did have an advantage time-wise, when Meishan thought about what she would be able to achieve in these 6 years, she felt insecure. When she realized that her world was one limited to a world always with Mifi and Naruki, she wondered how much she could do. When she realized that she had very little choice over her actions, she felt a deep horror welling up inside of her. In order to dispel those fears, in order to keep herself from feeling the anxiety caused by Liren, an existence that she couldn't see, and in order to take herself out of a state of ignorance of his past, she decided that she needed to know. I really am serious. Meishan sat there thinking to herself resolutely.
When Layfon opened the door, sounds of laughter came out from within.
This really is difficult.
Naruki muttered to herself, scattering the metallic balls everywhere as she fell to the floor in embarrassment. That wasn't bad for your first try.
Sharned said as he continued to stand on the metallic balls. He switched to 1 foot balancing on the balls and moved about with ease. Beside him, Mifi and Naruki oohed in amazement.
I definitely started practicing before you did.
Nina said quietly with indignation.
That's because I normally move about carefully without others noticing. Sharned smugly replied and jumped off the balls.
Well, that means that your technique will continually improve.
I see.
Mifi nodded her head with an O as she wrote in her notebook. The extension to the interview was almost completely about carrying out different types of training.
Then are there any platoons that catch your attention?
All of them. Our platoon's weakness is extremely obvious. All the teams will probably pick up on it. In order to become victorious, we can only try to find a way to overcome the weakness. There is no point in saying which platoons are strong because, no matter which platoon it is, they are all stronger than we are. All of us recognize that point very clearly.
But your battle records are very good.
That battle record might not represent our actual strength. But our constant good luck is an irrefutable truth. I hope that our luck will be effective only when we are in an unforeseen pinch, like when we are seen through by the enemy and they begin to hinder our attacks, or when we are ambushed by the opponent's traps. If we rely on luck like that, then defeat won't be far away. That's why we're working hard to prevent that kind of stuff happening.
KK, then, would you please say some final words for the readers?
I like this place, so that is why I joined the military arts department. That is all.
Thank you very much for accepting our...
Ending the interview, everyone started drinking the juice as they chatted about anything that came to their minds. Sharnid made innocuous jokes as Nina sat aside laughing bitterly, and seeing them, Mifi joined in too.
Naruki was still sulking over what happened before, and dragged Layfon to help her continue her challenge against the metallic balls. Feli kept an expression saying, "This has nothing to do with me," on the whole time. Mei Shen enjoyed the relaxed atmosphere that had spread across the room as well. Without knowing why, she felt anxious. Mei Shen thought that if she could fit in with everyone here, then she felt that the world that she was experiencing got a little bigger. But
Oh yeah, have you guys heard of the phrase Heaven's Blade successor?
with this sentence, Mifi tore apart the serene mood. Meijin didn't blame Mifi, as her strong sense of curiosity was without malice. Meijin knew a long time ago that Mifi would be unable to resist the enticement of unfamiliar things. Even though she clearly knew this, she still went and discussed her problem with Mifi, so she had no right to blame her. After class, Mei Shen had arrived at the park near the alchemy complex, alone. Not long before, she and Layfon had been eating lunch together. At that time, she tried to open her mouth and ask, but she could only think about it and never act. As she reminisced, she stepped into the garden where night would soon arrive. There was a guest who had arrived already, and even though there was clearly a seat next to her, she was still standing. Seemingly hearing Mei Shen's footsteps, that person turned her head. Her silver-white hair swayed with her body, contrasting against the mood of the falling sun.
You really came by yourself.
Yes.
Mei Shen stood in front of Feli, so nervous that she thought her heart would leap out of her chest. After arriving at school, she found a note on her desk. On it said, "There is something I would like to discuss with you alone," and it specified the time and place. Mei Shen came alone because the person who had asked her to come was the psychokinesist Feli, and it would be impossible to trick her. If a psychokinesist wished, then they could even count the number of bugs that were in the garden. It was impossible for Naruki and Mifi to hide from her.
I thought you wouldn't come.
I thought you wouldn't come either. When she picked up the letter from the desk, she was seen by 2 other people. The letter had been read by all 3 people, and they decided together that Mei Shen should go alone. Although Mifi held on to the idea of going together until the end, she met fierce resistance from Naruki.
This is a critical moment, and I think that if we do not obey this condition, then Mei Shen will have no way of intervening in any matter.
Even though the Layfon they met in the classroom seemed calm and no different from normal, Mei Shen felt that something deep within him was forcing him to put up that kind of expression, and it seemed very wearing. Mei Shen hated that feeling when she was helpless and couldn't do anything. She wanted to see his back.
Without beating around the bush, please forget that phrase from yesterday.
Heaven's Blade successor. When Mifi said that word, Mei Shen felt that the temperature in the entire room had fallen. Mifi's question was like detonating a bomb, and the cracks created from the explosion separated Mei Shen and the others from the 17th platoon. Feli and the others knew what Heaven's Blade successor really meant, and they knew what that phrase had to do with Layfon in his past. Mei Shen didn't know. At that moment, she clearly felt the difference.
Why? It has nothing to do with you, and I don't want an excessive burden on him.
But
She wanted to know. She wanted to get closer to Layfon. Would forgetting this phrase allow her to get close to Layfon? No, it could only divide them further apart.
Just to satisfy your own curiosity, does revealing another person's past make you happy?
Just as Mei Shen was about to open her mouth, Feli spoke.
that's not it.
But that's exactly what you guys are doing. You are unnecessarily digging up the past of another person in order to please yourself. And then, what are you going to do afterwards?
Of course she knew. She knew just how despicable her actions were. Just because she was afraid of that person in Grendon called leering, and in order to patch up the difference between them, Mei Shen wanted to know what that word meant, and at the same time, she realized how inferior her actions were.
I didn't think that doing so would please myself.
But,
But I still want to know, even though I don't know what will happen if I do know. But when I think about it, I feel afraid. Why must it be kept a secret? When I think about that fact, I feel afraid.
Why?
because if she knew, then perhaps her regard for Layfon might change a little. In Mei Shen's heart, her feelings for Layfon might change. She was afraid of that, and she was so afraid she was trembling. If her feeling changed like the flipping of a palm, then Mei Shen felt that she would definitely see herself as low and despicable. Even now, she was extremely jealous. Jealous of the people in the 17th platoon who understood what she did not. She was jealous of the fact that even though they knew the truth about Layfon, they still regarded him as a comrade. Layfon said that he would not return to Grendon. Was it that he wanted to return but couldn't? In the phrase, Heaven's Blade's successor, was there hidden the reason that prevented his return? Was it because of that reason that Layfon had given up the path of the military arts? If it was the case, then what Mei Shen was doing now was undoubtedly poking into Layfon's unhealed wounds.
Then why do you want to know?
Feli asked Mei Shen for a reason.
Even if she knew the reason hidden within the phrase, the people in the 17th squad still saw Layfon as a comrade. She wanted to protect. She was very regretful. It was as if she had been cast out of Layfon's world that she was regretful.
The sound quivered. Because I like Layfon. Because I like him.
That's why she wanted to know. But she was afraid that if she knew, her current relationship with Layfon might collapse. She didn't wish for her feelings to be trapped within herself. She wanted Layfon to understand, even if it was only one-sided to Layfon. She wanted to know about Layfon's past. Even if she didn't really want to dig out everything about Layfon, but instead she wanted to verify that even if she knew of Layfon's past, that her feelings for him would not change.
If you don't verify it, will you have no confidence in your feelings?
Yes.
Feli's voice was reproachful, but Mei Shen nodded without disguise.
Gingerly using your paws to test out the ground as you proceed. You only think about the step ahead, but think nothing of what the consequences are after. That isn't a very smart method.
After she knew, how would Layfon see Mei Shen? That's what Feli was trying to say. Was it possible for everything to stay the same?
Well,
Facing Mei Shen, whose expression was beginning to stiffen from fear, Feli continued to speak.
if that is how you do things, then there isn't much left for me to say.
After she said this, Feli turned away and left.
I have nothing to say to you anymore. And the last thing is a piece of advice. I don't know if you still want to know or not, but either way it's very difficult.
Mei Shen noticed that after saying this, Feli sighed. I see. Watching Feli's shadow leaving the garden, Mei Shen felt ignorant. There are many people who like Layfon. And she was definitely... Accompanying her nervousness, loneliness, and weariness, finally recognizing this problem, Mei Shen laid on the ground, exhausted. Deep within herself, she felt that there were a lot of hardships ahead of her. Epilogue. She seriously couldn't stand him. On her way back to her accommodations at Zuellni, Liren repeated this silently to herself again and again. Because it was going to be a long time before the next roaming bus arrived, there was nearly nobody staying here, and the hotel had a very empty feel to it. Liren angrily grumbled to herself as she placed her luggage beside the bed and just lay like that on the bed. She was alone now. It wasn't because she hadn't lived alone for a long time, it was just that it felt like she had been suddenly thrown into a silent world, and it brought Liren an empty feeling. It really had been a hectic day. With the help of Savaris, she had managed to cross 2 fighting cities and reunite with Layfon. If she were to describe it with words like that, it would only take a sentence or two, but she had experienced a really long day. On her way here on the roaming bus, she had crossed paths with filth monsters, realizing for the first time how terrifying their existence was. There was no other way that any other city had a group of military artists such as the Heaven's Blade successors with such immense power. Nor were they blessed with the leader of the Heaven's Blade successors, the Queen. That's why, in comparison to other cities, filth monsters weren't really a big issue. That's why destruction was more likely for the other cities. At least that's what people who lived in cities without Heaven's Blade successors said.
But as she thought about Layfon standing on the battlefield, her feelings suddenly became complicated. But as she had never seen Layfon being injured as much as this time before, perhaps it was true that other cities were even more dangerous than Grendon.
Liren continually pondered this question. Was it more dangerous in other cities, or in Grendon? Whichever one was actually more dangerous was of little consequence, as this question swirling though Liren's head was unimportant.
That was just a buffer of sorts, a necessary buffer for her to accept reality. Wriggling silently on her bed, she reached into her luggage bag with one hand.
As she touched what she wanted, she tugged it out of the bag. It was a wooden box wrapped up in a cloth. It was something very important that her adoptive father had entrusted to her. It was to be given to the Seiharden's successor, Akatana Dite. It was the proof of her adoptive father's forgiveness, the proof of her adoptive father's apology. It was also the proof of the bond between them.
I still haven't given it to him yet.
It wasn't that she was too busy and forgot to give it to him. But Liren couldn't just give it to Layfon like that. Maybe he would be so happy that he would start crying. If Layfon started crying, what would she do? Would she be happy as well? Of course. But that's not the only thing she would feel. Of course. But that's not the only thing she would feel.
It really is a mess, eh?
Her eyes turned a little warm. There was something rising up from her throat. They would probably start crying together. But she didn't want to start crying with him. She couldn't say to him, "Isn't this great?" Because before that, there were other things that she wanted to say.
I'm so happy that Layfon's safe.
She was alone in this room. A place where nobody could hear anything, where Layfon couldn't hear her, where nobody else could hear her. And so, she couldn't bear it anymore.
I'm so happy,
said Liren openly, her wrists covering up eyes that were overflowing with tears. Title, post-epilogue, Ordinary Days. That night, Minsat Knoll violently threw the thing beside him into the wall. That happened to be a wooden table which exuded extravagance and technology in both material and design. But with Mince's strength, the table collided with the sliding door with loud noise before it fell to the ground in pieces. Even that wasn't enough to suppress the rage in his heart, but at least it was enough to temporarily quell his impulses. If he didn't do that, he definitely would have stormed into the palace and completely destroyed the ceremonial banquet which should be going on over there right now. Not only that, he would also personally gouge out the pair of sleepy eyes which belonged to that poor-looking brat who would be there. The center of tonight's celebration was that child. Mince was still very young, somewhere in his mid-teens, but he was even younger. That's why Mince was so angry. Tonight they were commemorating the birth of the 12th Heaven's Blade receiver. That kid's name was Layfon Al-Saif. Since he became a Heaven's Blade, his name became Layfon Wolfstein Al-Saif. Since he became Layfon Wolfstein Al-Saif,
complained Mince piteously. His long black hair grew in a featureless, messy tangle.
The Utnol was one of the 3 royal families in Grendon. The current Queen Alshera was of the Almanese family. The family that the king or queen originated from was known as the current ruling house. There were to be 12 Heaven's Blade receivers, as there were only 12 blades made from the mysterious Grendon white dite, known as the Heaven's Blades. Before Al-Sharira's reign, there were 5 Heaven's Blades receivers. But now, all 12 had been gathered. But reality wasn't like that. Layfon Wolfstein Al-Saif, a member of the small school of Seiharden, an adoptive child, became the 12th Heaven's Blade. What's more was that Mince wasn't even given a chance to challenge Layfon. Moaned Mince. What he said wasn't actually nonsense. There was no doubt that the Almanese family and the Utnol family were the current ruling houses. More accurately, it was between the Utnol and Almanese families. The 3 royal families wanted to protect the bloodline of the first king, and they wanted to make sure that any marriages would give birth to more military artists. The minimal requirement for a suitor was being a military artist. And from the aspect of retaining the purity of the blood from the first king, the suitor had to also be of royal lineage from one of the 3 royal families. But purifying the bloodline too much could also lead to the passing on of inherent defects in the genes. After much argument between the 3 families, they came to an agreement that every 3 generations there would be an intermarriage between the 3 royal families. The current Queen Alshera was born of the Almanese and the Ronsmere families, and her husband was supposed to be of the Utnol family. He was Mensa's brother. No, he was originally supposed to act as a brotherly figure. Currently that brother no longer existed. He had eloped with some ordinary woman. Alshera had just smiled bitterly at the news, and her next suitor had yet to be decided.
If they went in order, then in theory Mince would have been offered to take the position. There were rumors among the citizens that Alshera couldn't forget about Mince's brother, and thus was delaying her decision.
And privately, she hated him who had thrown her away, which led to her hate of the Utnol family. Mince had believed those rumors. Unfortunately, his bad luck didn't end with the rumors. His parents were also successively unlucky. His father died in a battle with a filth monster, and his mother died of sickness not long after. And Mince became the head of the Utnol family. Even though he still had many uncles, according to the laws of the 3 royal families, they were very far down the list as heirs. If the situation arose where Mince died, the person who would inherit the position as head of the family wouldn't be his uncles, but a child of the current head of another royal family. And if Alshera didn't have any children, then the place would be taken by some child of the Ronsmere family. Mintz firmly believed that Al-Shara wanted to use some legitimate way to annihilate the Utnol family. In order to prevent that from happening, it was imperative that he become a Heaven's Blade. It wasn't only to spread his name as a protector, but to also show off his abilities as a descendant of the bloodline. And when there was a royal family marriage where the suitor was not of the royal family, then the next suitors would be chosen from the Heaven's Blade receivers. This way it was possible for him to reclaim the right as a suitor to the queen and recover the status of the Utnol family. However, he didn't get chosen for the 12th spot. Al-Shara had taken away even the chance to show his strength. This was a conspiracy. Mintz believed this without a shred of doubt. Sooner or later, Al-Shara was going to come to eliminate Mintz, but he wouldn't be sitting, waiting for his demise. Things like the law have no power over people who have been driven into a corner. In order to live on, they will bare their fangs at anyone. Mintz had changed his mood for the better, but looking at his face from the side, there was a miserable expression unfitting of his age upon his face.
She would only be happy on that day. The following days, she was as busy as a bee.
I really can't take this.
The Saiharden dojo was not far from the orphanage, and Liren stood outside with her hands on her hips. Only 10 years old, she was a mid-level student in elementary school. She had a steady personality and could usually be found cooking in the kitchen. She wore clothes designed for work and ease of movement. Her hair was also appropriately tied up in a bun. Following the latest trends, the hair in front of her bun curled to one side. Liren was standing in the makeshift reception area of the dojo. The second day since Layfon had become a Heaven's Blade receiver, which was today, the dojo had become unusually busy. Saiharden Katana School's dojo was only an old, small-scale dojo. The number of students in the dojo was as small as the dojo itself. There were countless dojos like this in Grendan. All those that taught the katana couldn't be counted with 2 hands. Of course, there weren't many that continued existing for a long time. Sometimes it was because the owner of the dojo died in a fight with a filth monster, and there weren't any successors. Some of the dojos fell into ruin after losing in fights with other dojos. But it wasn't an exaggeration to say that the size of a dojo in Grendon represented its status. A youth, who had been winning in official matches for 2 years straight, claimed victory yesterday in the Heaven's Blade Receiver selection matches, and officially became the 12th Heaven's Blade Receiver. That youth belonged to the Saiharden School. That is, this dojo located at the edge of the residence areas which was barely struggling by.
In the morning, before the doors of the dojo had even opened, there was already a long line of people outside the dojo hoping to get in. Liren busily responded to them, and even though it was already past noon, there were no signs of there being an end to all this.
Liren, take this chance and have lunch.
Okay, Tilba.
In an attempt to take her mind off the annoying problem, a nearby person went behind the reception area, brought a pot and started cooking. It looked like that there was no end to the people who wanted to join the dojo, and they weren't about to wait obediently in line either. They had obviously already gotten an admission slip, but they still couldn't line up properly. Looking at the scene, Liren was stumped.
I can't take this. I really want to just stay here instead.
Complained Liren. She was drinking some warm milk and had recovered somewhat.
Beside the reception area, there were tables prepared by the street's residents. It's just as it appeared. It's a small dojo, without many hands. The kitchen didn't have many staff either. Seeing Liren complaining, the person who was helping with the cooking started laughing. She was also a Nei Chen who grew up at the orphanage, and she had married recently, living the life of a newlywed.
Well, it's not like you can do anything about this, with Layfon doing all that.
A Heaven's Blade receiver. For the military artists of Grendon, that title held great meaning.
It was equivalent to being called the strongest. Wanting to study at the same school that trained one of the strongest is perfectly logical. Some famous examples would be the Awakens school, created by a Heaven's Blade, and Regios, the school for the successors of the 3 royal families. And there was also the dojo currently regarded as the most prosperous, Midnot. Those 3 military art schools all had current Heaven's Blades receivers as students. Although Grendon has 12 Heaven's Blades, it doesn't actually have 12 prosperous military art schools.
For example, the psychokinesists. The only psychokinesis user of all the 12 Heaven's Blades, Delbone, was the oldest of them all.
There were legends that said that she had already been a Heaven's Blade for several decades, and that perhaps she would have to step down from her position soon. For psychokinesis, the abilities required far outstripped those demanded of a normal military artist. Thus, there was no dojo which was open to take in disciples and teach them. Another example would be Karen K. Troyet represents this school in the Heaven's Blades. As it is also very hard to grasp, there are very few military artists who are willing to learn it.
Including these 2, with the 3 mentioned above, and excluding Layfon, there were still 6 others. Of the six, the one known as the strongest of the current Heaven's Blades, Lintens, wasn't born in Grendon.
He was a military artist who was visiting from another city, and under the Queen's recommendation entered the selection tournament and became a Heaven's Blade receiver. So if he did not found a dojo, then there was no way for him to pass on his techniques to anyone else, and he had no intentions of doing so. As for the other five, none of them fitted into any specific dojo in Grendon, and like Lintens, none of them had any intention of starting their own dojos either.
Putting all this into perspective, Layfon is the only Heaven's Blade receiver to become one having learned only the Sai-Harden katana techniques. So, if one was part of the Sai-Harden dojo, one could become a Heaven's Blade receiver. Of course, that's what everyone thought.
But the thing is,
Liren gazed across at the people who were hoping to gain entry after lunch break with mixed feelings. Wasn't there anyone who felt suspicious? Perhaps nobody had noticed the dite that Layfon was holding in tournament. That was a sword. Sai-Harden was clearly a school which taught the katana, not the sword. Thinking back, it was the day before the decisive battle, not the sword. Thinking back, it was the day before the decisive battle.
Inside the dojo, other than the caretaker, the two who had grown under the shelter of the Sai-Harden dojo, Derek and Layfon, were completely alone. The two were holding restored dites. In Layfon's hand was a sword.
I'm sorry,
said Layfon to a completely silent Derek. He then stored his dite away and placed it in its sheath. Liren quickly realized the meaning behind it. That was Layfon making it clear to Derek that he was giving up the way of the katana. And then, Layfon became a Heaven's Blade receiver.
Why would Layfon?
Even now, she still hasn't asked him about it. Until now, Liren always thought that she knew everything about Layfon. They were the same age, and thus they were placed into the orphanage at almost the same time. And at the time, they were both infants. Liren was an abandoned child. So was Layfon. The two had been together since before they understood anything. At that time, they didn't know that they shared circumstances with the other. They also had many other siblings unrelated by blood in the orphanage. Some were abandoned as well. Others had both their parents die, and nobody adopted the children who were sent here. There were various circumstances. She only recently found out that military artists very rarely gave up their children. Perhaps there was some sort of relationship like that, but the chances weren't high. Layfon treated Derek like his real father, and likewise, Derek treated Layfon like his own son. Of course, the other children in the orphanage also treated this kindly old military artist of few words as their own father. But Layfon was a military artist. Everyone in the orphanage had their own surnames. The ones who had last names kept them. Those who didn't know had Derek give them one. All the children were siblings who had grown up in the same circumstances together, but they wished that they could share their surname with someone else.
This felt somewhat lonely, but it was also something they could do nothing about.
Derek's last name was the same as the dojo that he was part of. Even though it was very small, even if a normal person carried the name of the dojo, it showed a deep connection with a military artist generations back. Not knowing her two parents, Liren obviously didn't know her surname either. This also meant that Layfon might not have his own surname. Layfon Sai-Harden. This name wasn't too shabby. As they continued on with their ordinary lives, perhaps it had also become reality. Derek adopted Layfon officially, and was originally meant to be the heir to the Sai-Harden techniques, but in his hands, Layfon was holding a sword.
Why? She couldn't think of any reasons. She couldn't understand why Layfon would do this at all. Liren was very surprised that when it came to Layfon, there were things about him that even she didn't know about.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Liren turned around after suddenly being spoken to. In front of the reception area was a youth who was slightly older than Liren. He stood there with a very amiable smile, with very thin eyes framed by a pair of glasses and a head of long silver hair.
Excuse me, is this the Sai-Harden dojo?
From his manner, it was obvious he came from a family of status.
Yes. I'm sorry, if you want to enter the dojo, please get out your entry ticket.
Ah, it's not like that.
The youth simultaneously cut Liren short and spoke to those who were lining up, showing he knew what was going on.
The thing is, I'm a foreigner.
Foreigner here referred to those who came by roaming buses from other cities.
I saw yesterday's match by chance, and I was very impressed, so I wanted to meet that military artist personally and came here.
Ha!
Liren nodded her head, and at the same time became slightly more alert.
Of course, I am an ordinary person. I'm not seeking to get into the dojo through meeting him. I just want to meet him.
Again, the youth expressed his plans loudly. The hopefuls who were lining up to gain entry to the dojo realized that he wasn't there to cut in front of them and stopped caring about what he was trying to do.
Dealing with a person younger than him by about 5 years, he was always very courteous. And Liren, who was always praised by others for her maturity, felt that this youth in front of her seemed even more like an adult than she was. The second day after the banquet, they started preparations in order for Layfon to have the same uniform as the rest of the Heaven's Blade receivers. It seemed that the adjustments to the Heaven's Blade, the measurements to a special combat suit for use outside a city, etc., all needed confirmation. Layfon said he had to temporarily stay in the palace for all those things. They didn't know when the filth monsters would come and ambush them, and Grendon had much more run-ins with filth monsters than normal. For a newly appointed Heaven's Blade receiver, there wasn't any time for rest.
Hearing this, the youth nodded his head with some comprehension.
It really is a pity. It seems I won't be able to meet him before my roaming bus leaves.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Not like you're at fault. And anyway, this place is very welcoming to us foreigners. In the city I live in, any foreigners who wanted to leave their accommodations had to undergo a relatively thorough inspection, and it's been the same for almost every other city I've visited as well. This treatment really surprised me.
That's why Liren wasn't about to answer his query.
I think it's because very few roaming buses come by here.
The youth reacted with a look of surprise in response to Liren's answer.
But that can't be the only reason, can it?
That. We have to treat our guests with hospitality, hoping that maybe we'll get some sort of gift from the guests.
If you put it like that, then I'm a complete cheapskate of a guest who doesn't remember any favors.
That's not what I meant.
Liren explained hurriedly and stopped what she was doing, facing the laughing youth.
Don't mind me, I was just joking. Thank you. Even though it's a pity that I can't meet that person, I still met someone very interesting.
He was referring to Liren. The serious youth revealed another smile, making Liren's face burn with redness. But this time, the youth took no notice to her reaction and left after saying goodbye.
A strange person.
Reflecting on her judgment of the youth, Liren returned her attention to her meal. There were still many people who wished to enter the dojo, and recording their names and addresses was something that Liren didn't have a choice in doing right now.
I refuse.
As he smoked a cigarette, Lintens responded to this completely uninteresting topic of conversation.
Go tell them that this is what I said.
Lintens lived in the district in Grendon reserved for receivers of the Heaven's Blade. The letter he was holding left his hand. The letter itself and the envelope it came in were in the same state as when he had received them. They were defying physics and were floating horizontally in the air. As they reached the rubbish bin, they were shredded. They were shredded so finely that even those who were used to putting together jigsaw puzzles would have trouble reassembling it, his paranoia making it nearly impossible to restore.
The floorboard was creaking. The robust male who had brought the message shrank back and retreated a few steps in the face of Lintens's attitude, making the noise.
It was the fate of an apartment that was built with cheap materials, and this was the sound of the floorboards aging. With a pair of spiritless, unfriendly eyes coupled with messy, long, uncut hair and that lazy beard covering his chin, Lintens laid on the sofa. He wasn't looking at the messenger at all, instead, staring at the smoke floating about in the room like mist.
Go back.
Lintens uttered the short sentence as he exhaled more smoke. The messenger escaped out the door, the floorboards he stepped upon making more creaking noises. The ashes descended towards a shirt full of wrinkles, but before they could land on the shirt, they were sent to the ashtray in clumps. The door was just left open like that, and outside the door near the stairs were sounds of people bumping into each other. The anguished cries of women, the panicked sounds of men, the sounds of people falling from the stairs, as well as the laughter which echoed from upstairs.
So noisy.
As Lintens mumbled to himself, the door moved to close itself. At the same time, a hand stopped it. And from behind it came a surprised sound.
Wow, the pathetic state you're in really is surprising. It's only been a week, so how the hell did you manage to make this room so messy? That's amazing in its own way.
Pulling open the closing door, the woman walked in without reserve as she looked about the room in a dazed manner. The woman, dressed in a maid uniform, took out a vacuum cleaner and stood in front of Lintens in a proud pose.
She didn't look to be older than 20, but nobody knew her real age. Regardless, this woman often used her leftover K for an internal type K to control her body at will. Changing her skeleton was a little difficult, so she couldn't change her height, but she could limit her own growth. At least since the many years ago he had first met her, her height and her visage hadn't changed at all.
What? You can't take it if there isn't that much smoke in the air, you smoking addict.
Saying this presumptuously, that woman strode past Linton's and opened the windows. Fresh air rushed past the woman and blew in, but Linton's sharp sense of smell still detected the stink of the rubbish dump placed next door in the construction room.
I believe I told you 64,800 seconds ago to leave me alone, you're correct.
Linton's was still lazing on the sofa as before, but the window closed by itself, and the breeze stopped.
If you've got a problem, then go find somewhere else to live. It's not like that will damage that icy attitude of yours. All the maids I assigned to work here all came to me one after another crying, pleading me to let them work somewhere else.
So just leave me alone. We've already had this conversation 38 times.
If a Heaven's Blade receiver lives in a place like this, then the Almany's ruling house will be questioned by others. I wish you could at least make it a little tidier.
The woman dressed as a maid. Her crappiness. Al-Sharara Amanis opened the window yet again. This time it wouldn't be closed again. She removed all the steel threads wrapped around the window. Seen from outside, a pair of hands darted about, grasping at empty air. Al-Sharara tossed the steel threads in her palm beside her. Those discarded steel threads silently returned to their owner.
Where are the clothes I gave you? I think they should suit your tastes.
You've watched too many Yakuza movies.
Look at that mean glare in your eyes. I'd like to see what kind of malicious being you are if you aren't some hoodlum.
As she said these rough words, she laughed gracelessly. Laughing, she kicked the accumulating pile of magazines with a well-rehearsed action, and after finding the power cord, she connected the cleaner into the hidden socket and proceeded to turn it on. The unique noise of the vacuum cleaner filled the room.
I want to kill you, you know.
Linton muttered this quietly in the midst of the chaotic noise the vacuum cleaner was making.
I know that. You idiot. You really piss me off. You don't even know your place.
For that, I became a Heaven's Blade receiver.
That's why I'm saying an idiot really is stupid. You've already revealed your real self. Just like that, you've leaked the information.
Surely there must be some Heaven's Blade receivers who aren't satisfied with you.
When Linton's became a Heaven's Blade receiver, there were some who expressed their disapproval. Linton's wasn't actually the first foreign military artist who became a Heaven's Blade receiver in Grendon. However, such military artists usually appeared about once in every king or queen's rule. There had never been a person like Al-Sharara who gave Heaven's Blades en masse to foreigners. Of course, it was natural for the higher-ups of the traditional military artists in Grendon to be offended by these actions. As for the isolated city, information from outside cities took relatively high priority. Technology, too, took high priority, along with expansion of the gene pool. They welcomed everything other than illnesses. But all these things needed time to fit together, and this was the new problem which this city was facing. First was Linton's, then it was Contia and Reverse's combination. Suddenly, 3 foreign military artists had become Heaven's Blade receivers. Even though survival of the fittest was the military artist's motto, they weren't very pleased about this. But
so what?
Showing no signs of wavering, Al-Shara, who continued to ponder, calmly went on.
There's no problem with them harboring discontent. If they don't like it, there's no problem either.
If they have any problems, then it's good if they tell me and don't hold back. Even if I am royalty, I'm merely the descendant of the bloodline of one of the strongest families in Grendon. If you think you're strong, then do your best to do something. Keeping them all in line is my job. As for any disobedient little dogs, giving them the punishing whip is the job of the master. That's all there is to it, is it not?
Declared Al-Shara as she cleaned the room with the vacuum cleaner. It didn't fit her maid uniform. As he thought that, Linton's cracked a smile, looking at her face from the side. She was a queen at birth. She was the strongest at birth. This woman's behavior gave off an aura of splendor, totally out of tune with the obedient feel of her maid uniform.
Well, just let me look forward to what sort of a song an idiot can sing. It's been really boring recently. I wanted to bully the new gentleman, but it seems he's not strong enough yet.
Well, I guess that'll be interesting.
Linton's had also watched yesterday's finals, but he only watched the opening ceremony and the participants before returning. For him, that was more than enough to predict the results, and he didn't guess wrong.
That was really unexpected. I thought you would decline.
That's because he's very good at learning from others. I just want to know if he really has such a talent, so I'm going to go test him.
I see. That will be very interesting,
whispered Al-Shara interestedly, laughing.
There have been many like him. Children who sealed their weapon of choice and techniques while still becoming a Heaven's Blade receiver.
Anybody could do that.
But they wouldn't do it like this. This is the nature of military artists, is it not?
Replied Alshera quickly. She revealed an expression as if Lintons had fallen for her tricks, and Lintons responded by closing his two eyes, as if an attempt to isolate himself from the noise of the vacuum cleaner.
A luxurious selection of cuisines were placed on the round table. Facing Master Mintz sat 3 other people. Washing down a mouthful of food with some wine, Mintz revealed a pained expression. He had already predicted this result. But, if possible, he didn't want to make an enemy out of him. Mintz couldn't understand him using steel threads, and that ability scared him.
Isn't that what I said? That guy is a foreigner. He's a pawn under Her Majesty.
The speaker was the one who was sitting in the middle of the 3. Calvin Gordeus Midnot, a 50-year-old male. He kept a head short hair, some of which had turned gray. A portion of that had turned completely white, which was kept long and tied up. Maybe it was because he had been working too hard, but the wrinkles on his face were deeply etched.
Lock it up. I'm afraid information here may reach Her Majesty's ears.
There's no need for such worries. For the next mission, the new guy and Lintons are being paired up as a team and being sent out. You think she will know about that event?
That's how it should be in theory, but what I'm worried about is Her Majesty taking some sort of precautionary actions.
That's another needless worry. I understand that woman's personality very well. If she figures out our intentions, she'll face us head-on for sure.
That's true. I think that's how she'd react as well.
The youth who replied smiled expectantly while nodding. He sat to the left of Calvin, who was pulling a long face.
Savaris, you speak as if you could win in a fight against Her Majesty.
Oh, isn't it because I've harbored such a thought that I'm sitting here right now?
Savaris replied to Calvin's question in a relaxed manner.
I'm just trying to say that Grendon's current situation isn't very good.
If that's the case, then what things can we tell Her Majesty directly? Isn't it the special privilege of the Heaven's Blade receivers to be able to see Her Majesty at any time?
No thanks.
Calvin glared at that young Heaven's Blade receiver extremely unhappily.
But Her Majesty won't listen. It's true that Her Majesty can't just hand out the Heaven's Blades, but Her Majesty can choose to hold those tournaments to decide the Heaven's Blades. It's worth celebrating the gathering of all 12 Heaven's Blades, but bestowing it upon a 10-year-old child.
I became a Heaven's Blade receiver at 13.
Savaris couldn't understand why Calvin thought this was a crisis.
Didn't Canaris become a Heaven's Blade receiver at 15? Just because he's young, he can't be a Heaven's Blade receiver. An argument like that is baseless.
The last person, Canaris, just watched the scene silently. She was a woman with a very ordinary visage. All the parts attached to her face seemed as if they were made to give off an impression of a total lack of personality, and if one's eyes left her for just a moment, you wouldn't know she was there anymore.
There really are too many young people,
complained Calvin in a painful manner. Just as he said, among the current Heaven's Blade receivers, those who were relatively young took up a large proportion. There were 4 Heaven's Blade receivers military artists who had served before Alshira's reign. Excluding Delbone, who was an exceptional case, the other 3 had all been bestowed with their Heaven's Blades in their late 20s or early 30s. Compared to that, starting with Alshira's reign, the oldest any Heaven's Blade receiver had been given his or her position was Lintons, in his late 20s. The rest were usually made Heaven's Blade receivers in their teens, with some just over 20. And then there was the 10-year-old Layfon.
It's as if Her Majesty was attempting to crush the record of youngest Heaven's Blade receiver, eh?
He had held that record just a few days ago.
Following the record back, following that is Tigris Sama, or Delbone Sama. It seems getting a 10 or so year old kid to carry such a burden will be very hard on him.
This isn't a joke.
Annoyed by Savaris's tone, Calvan slammed his hand down on the round table.
The dish on the table shook. Canaris looked at the spilt sauce spread across the tablecloth with displeasure.
Mince reproached Calvin mildly. The people who were gathered there were all military artists who came from Grendon's dojos. For example, Calvin Gordius Midnot is one who had opened his own dojo.
And on his left, the ever-smiling Savaris Qualifin Luckens. He was a part of the Luckens dojo, which had helped an early Grendon ruler create the Heaven's Blades, and he was also a descendant of those people. And sitting on the right, Canaris Eriphos Riven. She was the successor of the 3 royal families. That is, she was a part of the dojo Rivenes, which gathered members of the royal family who hadn't inherited any positions among royalty. Among these 3,
The one with the closest blood ties would have to be her.
Such direct words! Who would dare say such a thing? The queen's assassination, the passing on of the crown.
The one who would step up to the place of king would be Mince. Going by age, it should actually be Tigris, but even before Al-Shara became queen, he had a chance yet didn't concern himself with such things, letting Al-Shara inherit the position. If that were the case, he would probably do the same again this time. Mince didn't have the ability to become a Heaven's Blade receiver. Perhaps he could wait to become betrothed to Al-Shira, but right now, Mince wasn't considering that option at all. Even then, that was only a possibility and there was no guarantee he would become king. Mince didn't forget about making his promises. He was very clear as to why those three were here.
They were afraid that the authority of their respective dojos would be diminished. All 12 Heaven's Blade receivers were gathered, and few of them came from their dojos. This implied that even if one trained at another dojo, one could still become a Heaven's Blade receiver. The Heaven's Blade was the ultimate goal of military artists in Grindon. There wasn't a better yardstick than that to measure one's own strength by. For that, young military artists went to open dojos to train and refine their techniques. Purely fighting for survival really was a little tedious. Everyone also wished to calmly enjoy the pleasure of grandeur.
For that, they all yearned for that seat of the Heaven's Blade receiver, won through a competition of pure strength. Of course, only people who wanted to reach the sky in one go dreamed of that.
To those who had already achieved something, these up-and-coming rookies were nothing more than nuisances. Naturally, the increase in Heaven's Blade receivers put them on guard, and until today, perhaps because they were so young, the new Heaven's Blade receivers never bothered to set up their own dojos and were never regarded as a threat. But this time, Layfon was different. 10 years old, a Heaven's Blade receiver who was too young. He was trained by the Saiharden dojo.
A dojo built in some corner of the city, it looked as if it would topple over if you just threw a pebble at it. Among the numerous small dojos, Saiharden was potentially dangerous to the larger dojos.
Those who had a burden have to strive to continue carrying that burden. These people existed as military artists in order to survive in this city. Even though they knew that strength was paramount, there were few who were willing to throw away their burdens for that power. Calvin was the same, and even including the heads of the other two's dojos, they were few among many. As soon as they learned that Minsa was unable to take part in the selection battle for the Heaven's Blade, they began to run back and forth for today, which is why they were able to so quickly assemble 3 Heaven's Blade receivers before Mince now.
Then, what should we do next?
Savaris spoke first.
For us, the greatest threat right now is Lintense. Wait until he leaves the palace and then do it.
Mince nodded in response to Calvin's inquiry.
In a normal filth monster attack, it isn't the Heaven's Blade receivers but squads of normal military artists who were mobilized. Perhaps Layfon would also be dispatched, but Lintense would likely be left to support.
They were waiting for the mature phase filth monster to attack. When that happens, they wouldn't order normal military artists to sortie. Heaven's Blades would be dispatched to welcome it in battle. And if the Heaven's Blade receivers were dispatched in order, then Layfon would be first. But being his first time fighting a mature phase filth monster, then it was almost certain that Lintense would be sent out for battle as well. In order for Layfon to quickly gain experience fighting mature phases, Layfon would definitely be picked in the next mature phase battle, declared Mince.
A month passed. A very boring month.
Al-Shara's weekly, quick, but ineffective cleaning visits made the room seem even more chaotic. Although Lintense had reservations about all his resistance was useless, because Al-Shara firmly believed that all that was involved in cleaning was using a vacuum cleaner. It really hurt his head. It was the same thing yesterday. Lintense could only watch as everything was messed up. Afterwards, Al-Sharia walked out of his home with a pleased look on her face.
Today, Lintense arrived at the palace's flower garden. It was the spacious central garden.
There weren't any railings or the like to prevent falls installed. Only the gardener and the Heaven's Blade receivers had access to this garden. The gardener would never appear here outside of his work hours, and the Heaven's Blade receivers wouldn't do anything as stupid as falling from the garden and dying. Put another way, this place forbade Heaven's Blade receivers who did stupid things, because this was a private area for the ruling family within the palace. Except that's exactly where Lintense was. There was another person there.
Only your memory is far superior to anyone else's,
said Lintense, as he watched the child who sat on the ground before him, sweating profusely.
Thanks for your guidance.
But you're too used to having K flow through your hands. Make the K flow around your whole body. Before you can do that, I forbid you from holding your sword other than during battles.
Understood.
He originally thought that the child wouldn't understand what he was doing, but he was unexpectedly obedient, which made Lintons feel a little despair. On that visage which terrified many people, there had to be something that makes it seem unfriendly. But that child wasn't actually afraid of him. After calmly adjusting his breathing, he got up immediately. He wasn't sweating at all anymore. The breeze which blew through across the garden had aired his body dry.
That's it for today.
Thank you for your guidance.
Facing Lintens's retreating back after he had finished speaking, the child lowered his head. Like other children, those clear eyes seemed to reflect absolutely nothing. But in reality, they were unconsciously absorbing everything before him and adding them to his understanding. To this child, training his body was merely a confirmation process through which he could reproduce what he saw before him. Leaving behind the child to self-training, Lintons returned to the palace. There was a youth standing there. He was watching what was going on in the garden. So that's the new guy.
Yeah.
That pair of hypnotic eyes that attracted women's obsessions stared without reserve at the child's actions. That child was Layfon. Why are you specially training him?
To kill time, I guess.
It really is a great way to burn time, eh? I actually thought it was some game to protect this stupid kid who showed up out of nowhere.
The youth's name was Troyat, one of the Heaven's Blades.
The purpose is clearer than that.
I know, but that child is the only person here that I didn't know before he became a Heaven's Blade receiver. Only Oju-chans who never leave their homes would think that that alone was enough to accomplish his goals. We're pretty annoyed by this as well, and even Riameo-san is tired of him. What are you guys planning?
Nothing.
Really? So none of us get to fight? That's brilliant! As long as I can sleep in a woman's bed, it's fine. Nothing else could possibly better. I'm so happy I'm about to cry.
From his purposely opened palms, he seemed unbiased and genuinely happy. However, in the next moment, Troyat's expression instantly darkened.
Can't even be a bad guy. Quite pitiful, eh?
The meaning of his words were very clear. Mintz had failed. That wasn't to say that his attempt was exposed. If it was exposed, that pretty much meant failure. If it was a Heaven's Blade receiver, surely he would understand that point. Mintz could only play the role of the pitiful clown, even though he understood.
They're plotting something as well, right? The Heaven's Blade receivers that were assisting Mintz. And there were 3. It was probably Calvin-Osan's bad habit of meddling too much, which caused this kind of result. If they just ignore that extra troublesome guy, it'd probably be fine. But what's the status of the other 2 guys? Are they obstacles like Calvin? Hey, this isn't good. You're not even that old, and you're already being shackled down by all these conspiracies. Youths should just act like youths and live life passionately in order to get something out of it, shouldn't they?
Having said this, Troyat was, after all, barely 20 years old.
Compared to you, who's only passionate about women, I think I'm a lot better.
What? Boss is the type that prefers revolution.
How could I be such a troublesome thing?
If you don't know, then please shut that oily, slick voice of yours up, otherwise I might actually leave, Nay. And also, don't come too close, you have too much perfume on. Well, after all, Boss is an OG-san, so please don't infect me with your outdated tastes. After having a go at each other, the 2 each went their own way. In the garden, Layfon was still doing his self-training. It's only been a month, but he was already familiar with the basic usage of the steel threads. And adding on top of that his own abilities, there was no real problem using them in battle. Well, maybe not quite ready yet. Layfon was still not aware of the horror of the steel threads. Without tasting the effects of the weapon that he was using, he still couldn't say that his understanding of it was flawless. Troyat had already lost interest in Layfon and left. Lintons also started moving away. At this time, an announcement came echoing across the sky. The filth monster is currently getting closer. A mature phase stage 2. It will come within the battle area in 2 days. It was as if the sounds some Oba-san was making as she sat under the sun had been transmitted right to their ears. Near the walkway's patio floated a psychokinesis flake. This was Delbone's voice. Even though she was now an Oba-san who was lying in a hospital, her psychokinesis showed no sign of weakening. Yes, it'll arrive around midday. Somebody probably asked a question. The voice in the flake answered the question casually. It was as if the flake let you see her pondering the problem. You have to eat lunch properly. You can't skip, okay? If you don't eat properly, you won't grow. The person asking the question was probably Kantia or Barmilan. There's no need to measure a woman's charm with a man's scale. That's obvious. But a woman with charm can't evade the looks of men. Hence, they can't evade men's measuring gazes. Right. Behind, Troyat revealed a bitter smile.
Stop it, guys. The battle area will be roughly 10 kilometers northwest off the outer edge of the city. There's no need to use the land rollers. You don't need any travel time either. Is this okay?
The question was directed towards Al-Sharira.
Yeah, I got it. Then Lintons go back up. Layfon go attack. Lintons, you better support Layfon properly. And Layfon, even though you're a child, you are already an outstanding Heaven's Blade receiver, so go do your best.
In the mid-air garden, Layfon nodded to the flake in front of him several times. Good. A very good answer. I like kids with spirit. When you grow a bit older, I'll introduce you to my granddaughter, Delbone-sama. If you happen to know a young and charming woman, please introduce her to me.
Troyat, if you could place all your attentions on one woman only, I would introduce you to an exceptional beauty.
That really is a harsh request. Then please give up. Ayaya, Calvin-sama, can you not show such a gloomy and unhappy face? You should live your life a little more leisurely. Then, everyone, I hope it's a pleasant battlefield.
After saying this, Delbon's voice could no longer be heard. The flake left from above Lintance's head.
Leaving the palace's corridors, leaving the mid-air garden, probably returning to their surveillance of the city. A pleasant battlefield, eh? Lintons pondered as he walked. As to the reason for throwing away the city he had grown up in, then it would be because the environment there didn't have anything that could equal his strength.
A city where nothing really happened. A peaceful city where nothing would happen. There was nothing that he needed to protect with his life there, and he didn't know how much time would pass by before the city ran into a mature phase filth monster.
Just a second stage mail would be great already. Just that would be a huge deal for his city. But for Lintons, that kind of level couldn't even be considered any opposition, merely an enemy. It definitely couldn't be considered a pleasant battle. Deciding to leave the city for a while was also because he discovered his great desire for danger.
The thing known as greatness is very difficult to maintain with a relaxed frame of mind. Seeing his steel threads wire technique, which he had bet his life on training and mastering, gradually rusting from not having a place to be used, made him deeply felt how hollow his current life was.
It was during his 20th year that he felt this, and so he left his city.
The following 5 years, he lived a wandering life. He arrived at Grendon because he heard it to be a city that had gone mad.
He heard rumors of a city which frequently ran into filth monsters, a city which roamed in the danger zone. It was as if that city was taking the initiative and actually wanted to battle with the filth monsters, continuously fighting all year round.
So he arrived here. If the rumors were true, then he could probably fully unleash his strength. And the result far exceeded his expectations, because in his first encounter, he had allowed his arrogant self to taste defeat.
You're very strong, Oni-san.
Yes, a girl roughly the same age as Layfon right now wove through all of the steel threads that Lintons had released. And not only that, even when the steel threads bound her up, shredded her skin and flesh, they failed to give her even a single trace of a wound. And like that well-known phrase, the bridge of his nose was broken.
Do you want to prove that you are great? Then enter the competition so that you're recognized here.
The girl said this in an aloof banter with her foot atop Lintons' stomach as he lay there with blood steadily flowing out of his nose.
If you do that, sooner or later, I'll have you experience a battlefield that makes you sigh, I'm so glad I'm not there.
He hadn't been on such a battlefield yet. There did exist a battlefield which satisfied him a little. At least it was 1 billion times better than staying in his hometown, rusting. But could he be satisfied with just that? Please stop joking.
I won't rest until I see it with my own eyes.
Lintons mumbled, directing it towards Al-Sharia, no longer standing before him. After that, he returned to the palace. The emergency alarm rang out across Grendon. And let's go!
Layfon said this as he used an emergency use backpack to carry his younger brothers and sisters on his back. The young children were running, revealing the urgent atmosphere. But that was just the mood of the bright children, excited by just leaving their front door. It definitely wasn't the urgency of possible loss of life, that sort of sorrowful atmosphere.
Ah, Layfon. Why are you wearing those clothes?
Turning back, he saw his childhood friend standing there, her eyebrows creased.
Isn't the new training uniform folded up nicely over there? Really?
It's okay. I'm changing out of these pretty soon anyway.
No, you're unpresentable.
Even though she said this, he obviously didn't have enough time to change clothes. As Liren grumbled, she tried to make the wrinkles in his shirt less conspicuous, tugging on the collar and the sleeves. Layfon stood there uncomfortably, silently allowing Liren to fix his attire.
Make sure you do it properly next time.
Okay, Tilda. Hearing Layfon's half-hearted answer, Liren pinched Layfon's cheeks.
Ouch, Tilda.
He was obviously acting.
Layfon.
What?
Don't get injured.
No problem. Didn't I safely return all those times before? I'll return safely this time as well.
Before Layfon had become a Heaven's Blade receiver, Layfon had already fought on the battlefield. In Grendon, those who didn't achieve a certain amount of results in the competitions weren't allowed to fight on the battlefield, and they also couldn't receive the military artist grants.
And the young military artist's grants would only be given until 15. Layfon had been participating in the competition since 2 years ago. After achieving his goal in the first competition, he started participating in every battle he was allowed to fight in. If one went onto the battlefield, a military artist's grants would be more than others. Layfon gave all of that money to the orphanage.
But today you're alone, right?
Liren looked up the dite belt strung around her childhood friend's waist. On it hung a unique dite. Today was Layfon's first battle as a Heaven's Blade receiver.
Linton-sama will be there as well. That person is very strong, so there's no problems.
Him saying this didn't lessen Liren's worry at all.
Then let's make a promise.
A promise?
Liren was stunned by Layfon's proposal.
A promise I'll definitely come back safely. So, you have to make me a week's worth of food without any green vegetables whatsoever.
3 days.
Mm.
If you don't eat properly, you won't grow. Isn't that what Lucia Neeson said?
Lucia was a girl who was helping with the cooking recently and was the one responsible for working in the kitchen before Liren. Also, she was the one who had taught Layfon and Liren how to cook.
So mean. Fine, I got it.
Layfon nodded his head very unwillingly, and after raising his hand and shouting goodbye, he turned and left the orphanage. The younger brothers and sisters shouted towards his retreating back. Layfon waved back at them before leaping out. Liren sent Layfon off as she watched his shadow leaving, using his emergency high-speed dash, flying across rooftops as she whispered,
"You clearly have nothing that you don't like eating."
But they had already made their promise. Now she could only believe in him.
A late Layfon saw what the uniform he was going to wear outside of the city looked like. It was a delicate grass-green-colored pollution isolation suit. Next to it was placed a helmet marked with Wolfstein. The suit itself was labeled with Wolfstein, indicating the accessories were made especially for him. Although it didn't affect movement very much, it would still probably create a bit more wind resistance. But for Heaven's Blade receivers, they had to carefully take into account that sort of minute detail as well. But also, Heaven's Blade receivers were a symbolic existence. Sometimes, when battling large numbers of filth monsters, their existence can improve the performance of other military artists, so they can't neglect the ornaments on their uniforms.
Isn't Sensei wearing a protective uniform?
Even though he hadn't been ordered to be addressed as such, Layfon still called Linton's Sensei.
You're the only one leaving the city.
Layfon had some doubts as Lintense prevented the technical support members from getting close to him as he continued to wear his normal clothes.
This is your battle. I'm just insurance. I'll deal with the guys you leave out. The next time there are orders, it'll just be you by yourself. Don't embarrass yourself.
I understand.
The obediently nodding child didn't have a look of fear at all. Because he was a child, his only reaction to anything in the world that he didn't understand was indifference. That pair of eyes no longer had their usual look, a very good expression. He had gotten rid of any emotions. It was an expression reflecting Layfon concentrating all his thoughts into the upcoming battle.
The young child made such an expression. Was this a lamentable occurrence? Having once lived in a peaceful city when he was young, he considered it.
However, he didn't have too many feelings on that point, and he didn't really think it was lamentable. Taking it a step further, in the entirety of Grendon, how many children other than Layfon could make such an expression? That is to say, Layfon was a unique example.
You still don't know how to use the steel threads, you understand that, right?
Yes. Wearing only equipment for traveling outside a city, Lintonse made all the technical support members go away. Layfon lifted his head to look at the helmet, playing with the buckle, and walked up to Lintonse.
For a person who originally uses a katana, this fight will be rather constrained, but this is a battle that you have chosen, so just fight as you like.
Layfon showed a moment of surprise, but it vanished immediately from his face.
There's no problem. I've made a promise with her to get home safely. If I provoke her anger, she's terrifying.
Really?
Although he didn't know who Layfon had made this promise with, it was fine, seeing how he was speaking with such passion.
Then go.
Layfon took the helmet, strapping it on properly. After checking the connectors for gaps, Linton slapped him on his back. After the stairs opened up leading below, Layfon jumped out.
Then I wonder if the comedy over there will be able to meet expectations.
Moving towards the outer edge of the city, Lintons whispered silently, the words never carrying across to that mid-air garden within the palace. At the same time, in the mid-air garden, the emergency alert was already fading, and the city had sunk into silence. Strong winds were blowing roughly beyond the air filter. Someone experienced could detect the approach of filth monsters in that wind condition. However, in Grendon, there were few days when the wind was calm. That's why, inversely, in Grendon, people who could detect filth monsters only from the outside were rare. All most people know is that on calm days, roaming buses are more likely to arrive. Alshera laid on a long bench in a corner of the mid-air garden, hands resting on the armrests, sleeping.
The emergency alert did not wake her up. For the sake of sleeping here, she purposely stayed up all night. She had no intention of simply waking up. She slept so deeply that she wouldn't even have any dreams. Strong wind from outside couldn't reach inside because of the air filter. A breeze stroked her cheek, blowing her hair gently. Warm sunshine bathed her whole body. The perfect conditions for basking in the sun and taking an afternoon nap had been met.
The hell?
Yet Al-Sharira's eyes were awake.
What the hell is this? There was not even the hazy feeling one gets after waking up. The body was claiming lack of sleep. Her body stressed that it hadn't slept enough. But despite that, Alshera woke completely from her slumber.
Geez, I really wish you did it more simply, you know. Even among the Heaven's Blades, you're the #1 sake user, right? Get a grip a little more, Canaris.
At those words, the people standing at the entrance of the royal garden trembled.
Or is this not your fault, I wonder? That's right, you didn't have any bloodthirst. If you had a moment more, you could have approached about another 10 steps, I think. If that's the case, then who? Whose fault is this, I wonder? Calvin? Severus? Or is it Mintz? All members come here for a moment.
Alshera stood there with her hands on her hips, shouting. Canaris stood there, stunned, before hurriedly stepping forward, followed by Severus and Calvin. And lastly was Minz's silhouette.
Your Majesty.
I don't want to hear any excuses.
Alshera cut off Calvin's explanation.
What is this unsightly behavior? You came for an assassination, didn't you? Show more backbone.
At Alshera's rebuke, everyone was unable to move.
It is very like us to express objections with military might. However, the fact that you can't even express the suck in success is really lamentable, especially for me.
I've been really excited about this, you know. Working through the night, I was filled with weariness as I waited here. Do you understand? The troubles that I went that far for has been made into nothing. Would you like some of my leftover anger as change?
Her displeasure from sleep deprivation showed through as Alshera glared at the four of them.
Ah, man. You wasted it all. What a bad feeling. I can't take this. I've got no more energy. Minz, you have to take responsibility. If you can't find something interesting that'll make me laugh, then I'll have to start the punishment game.
Facing the various responsibilities he had to take, Minz shuddered. Unable to bear any more of Alshera's slow scolding, Minz shouted out.
A conspiracy. Aren't you getting a bit too far ahead of yourself?
You've never participated in an official competition, have you? Those with insufficient results aren't allowed to participate in the selection battles, right? You didn't think that you would get special treatment just because you're part of the 3 royal families, did you? Even Tig G followed the process step by step as well, didn't he?
Okay, that's that. Well, I'm sure the rest of you did something like this because you were displeased for one reason or another, right? Well, let's hear it in order, starting from Calvin.
Recently, Your Majesty's Heaven's Blade examination standards.
For those who have skills matching yours and gain recognition in proper order in accordance with the laws, should I not give him a Heaven's Blade? It's what the royal family is here to do. Okay, rejected. Next.
Calvin powerlessly drooped his head. The next person to speak, Severus was lightly smiling as he began weaving his speech.
I want to fight, Your Majesty.
Is that all?
I'm not like those other people who consider this world in such a complicated way. I only wanted to fight with Your Majesty, so I accepted Minsama's request is all.
That's so damn boring. Next.
Canaris kept her head lowered and said nothing. However, she quickly whipped out her dite from her belt and restored it. The hilt of the sword had a decorated guard, and the sword was very slender. It was a rapier.
Canaris had the same intentions, really.
Looking at Canaris' silent, intense glare, Alshera revealed a confounded expression, but that quickly changed into a smile.
Okay then, so be it. If you guys can beat me, perhaps I will take what you guys said into consideration.
Then, what about what I said?
As long as we battle, it'll all be good, won't it?
Well, I guess so.
Savaris stood up as well, restoring the dite on his hands and feet.
What will you do, Calvan-sama?
Since it's already gotten to this stage, I don't suppose I have any choice. Saying this, Calvin also restored his dite. It was a great sword. For now, I want to make that, perhaps, a certainty.
Oya, is it that you have confidence in beating me?
I've never gone into battle thinking that I would lose. The K around Calvin began to expand, making the flowers in the garden tremble, and even the trees were beginning to shiver. Calvin's tall and solid body let out a golden aura. The high-density K being gathered in tandem with his fighting style was also undergoing change. The golden K was almost like a viscous liquid, as it seethed around him, still floating around Calvin. You Majesty, before you wanted to ask us if we could ever hope to defeat you with just this kind of level, right?
Yeah.
From the start, I never thought about assassination. What immediately followed these words no longer sounded like a spoken language. The golden K, which was revolving about Calvin, suddenly rushed towards Alshera, but about fighting it out with you, fair and square. Alshera wanted to move her wrist, but she was blocked by something. It was an external type burst K variant, armed sword. It was a move Calvin created himself. It was normally used as an armor, with the half materialized K surrounding his whole body. Although its defense wasn't as strong as Kongu K, but it was like a liquid which could congeal instantly into blades the moment anything approached it. It was different from creating K of the same hardness and defensive strength as Kongu K. It was a sort of preemptive defensive measure. Ooh, tilde. That thing was currently wrapped around Alshera's body, binding her with hardness and stickiness akin to industrial-grade rubber. But it couldn't hold for long. They had no intention to wait for it to break. At this moment, Savaris and Canaris mobilized. In the moment it took to shake off the armed sword K, the two had closed in on Alshera. They didn't use any special techniques, but the fist and the sword were strikes charged with their respective owners' K. If they couldn't break through with one point of attack, then they would break through with two. Two Heaven's Blade level K energies came rushing from different directions. The mid-air flower garden shook intensely. The garden was filled with sounds of explosions and flashes of light. Evading with difficulty, Mince was sent flying into the wall, joining the mid-air flower garden the outer walkway by a full-body hit. Success! As Mince landed within the doorway, his whole body was racked with pain, but as he untwisted his body, he expressed his confidence. With that, I'm sure she's been gotten rid of. But Mince still didn't notice. His own naive understanding. As the last heir of the main branch to the Utenol family, one of the three royal families living a greenhouse life within the Grendon military arts world, he couldn't understand. The force of their own strikes also blasted the three Heaven's Blade receivers apart from the center. The lawn in the flower garden had been torn up. The soil lining the flower garden was scattered about, and the stones beneath the soil could be seen. It was like a small-scale meteorite crater. The dust scattered about in the center gradually settled.
Ooh, Tilda. Well, I guess you guys get a pass.
The voice ranged hair out from the center.
To limit the damage around you to a minimum, you opened out two armed swords. Quite befitting your hard-working personality, Calvan. But I'm quite fond of this place, so it's great that this place hasn't been wrecked.
Alshera was standing there. On that beautiful face of hers, there wasn't a single speck of dust. She merely stood there, unperturbed.
Mince's voice quivered, making incomprehensible noises. That Alshera stood there without a single injury in that soil crater was an unbelievable sight for Mince. A pained expression appeared on Calvin's face, and even Savaris smiled bitterly. Only Canaris stood there, expressionless, although her eyebrows were slightly furrowed.
But I should take off points for not being able to restrain me just like that, right? Well, I can sympathize seeing how you guys made the decision to give up after understanding you were defeated.
Thank you very much.
The only one obediently lowering his head was Savaris.
As expected, teamwork you haphazardly created won't do very much, Calvan-sama.
It seems that way.
Calvin opened out his armed sword yet again. The golden K wrapped itself around his body anew.
Then we'll just have to act according to the situation of the battle on our own.
I suppose those are some good words.
Agreeing to Calvin's suggestion, the three silently increased their K pressure. That's all they did, but it began to warp the airflow. The intense K flow expelled the air and created a strong gale. It was as if the mid-air flower garden was in the eye of a hurricane. But in the center of that,
Didn't I say that I was kind of partial to this place? If you guys go all out, then it would be very troublesome and you would break this place, which is why.
Al-Shayra raised a finger. Closing an eye with a coquettish expression on her face, she quietly whispered,
Let's end this here.
What happened in the next instant was something that Mintz would probably never be able to explain. Victory was decided just like that.
the wilderness was just as wild and rough as its name suggested. Despite wearing shoes with strong soles made specifically to cater for this, he could still feel that intense feeling penetrate throughout his body. Layfon carefully stepped on the ground as he marched forward, finally arriving at the point 10 kilometers out from the northeasternmost edge of the city. His target had already entered his line of sight. Layfon pulled out his daite and restored it. The Heaven's Blade, a platinum dite, appeared in his hands.
Even the weight of Grendon's mysterious platinum could be adjusted according to the user's wishes. Normally, one would have to compromise some aspect of density, hardness, viscosity, shape, or conductivity.
But the Heaven's Blade had no such issues. Regardless of the hardness of the dite, it was possible to make it whatever weight was convenient for the user. It was hard to break, and it could change to any shape freely. The only setting Layfon was particular about was weight. As for the others, he entrusted them to the special Heaven's Blade technicians. You're the first Heaven's Blade to say such a thing. Is it because you're young that you underestimate the value of a weapon? Looking at Layfon silently listening to his criticism, the old technician finally revealed a defeated expression, giving up attempting to persuade him, and set the sword to match Layfon's physique. It's just a sword anyway. As long as it could be set to the same weight that his wrist was used to, then anything else would be fine. All he needed to remember was that part, and forget everything else. That's all the awareness he had for a sword. That weight he was so used to in his hands would quickly become a part of his body. The K spread out like the nervous system, making the inflow of K into the sword even more complete. Was this the result of training under Lintens with the steel threads in the past month? Like being able to send K into his sword the same way his K would instinctively flow into his muscles. Even though his fighting stance was a little forced when he fought with the sword, it could still achieve what was desired. This wasn't just a feeling. With this sort of ability, couldn't he toss the blade into the air and manipulate it freely? Maybe he should try next time. Even Layfon wasn't brave enough to just toss it into the midst of a battle. The enemy was getting closer. Layfon reached into a small pack on his waist and retrieved two small objects and tossed them skyward. The two arced across in a parabola, and using his external taike, Layfon shattered them. The shattered objects turned into yellow dust and scattered about in all four directions. It was a kind of dried animal fat. After other refining steps, it could be made into soap. But right now, it wasn't like that. It was just to give the surroundings the smell of life. Would the filth monsters react to the scent of living things? Naturally, people would ask such questions, but results were definitely produced. In terms of larvae moving in large herds, it could drastically change their movement routes. But as for older filth monsters, the effect was minimal. For mature phase filth monsters, it was impossible to tell if it even had any effect. The technical department had once told him that. But regardless, this was the first time he had fought a mature phase. Everyone bestowed their experience upon Layfon. As if it were cautious, the mature phase didn't change its bearing, but it noticed the existence of a tiny life form en route to Grendon, although it wasn't affected by the smell, but by Layfon's shadow. A mature phase stage 2, just as Delbone predicted. As it got closer, the mature phase revealed that mysterious body shape. Like a bug in its larval state, when it shed, it would get rid of its legs and specialize into a flying form, but the mature phase purged even its insect form, transforming into something akin to a reptile.
There was some doubt. Because of the lack of nutrition when growing up as filth monsters, they would attack cities.
And when they transformed into mature phases, they would become extremely hungry. Then why would there be so many mature phases in the area that Grendon wandered? If cities in the same region were annihilated, it was impossible for the news to not spread to Grendon. But they didn't hear of such reports of other cities being destroyed. Then, couldn't the filth monsters reproduce through the pollutants and cannibalism? Then, why would they attack humans? For Layfon, he couldn't understand this. But Delbone gave this answer. Although he wasn't totally uninterested, he certainly wasn't able to understand the filth monster's feelings. The filth monster near him was exactly as Delbone described. It had just entered the mature stage a week ago.
Arara, I've made a little mistake.
From within the helmet came the voice of an Obasan, who seemed to be in a good mood.
What is it? At first I thought there were two, but it seems there's only one. What Layfon saw before him were indeed two filth monsters. Some distance off, climbing below Grandin, was a body far larger than those supporting pillars, sporting a pair of semi-transparent wings. Long and sharp teeth could be seen protruding from that long and strange mouth. Only the eyes were like those of a bug's, with a pair of dark green glass ball eyes. Those two looked as if they were stacked atop each other and flying.
No, please look carefully. They're linked together at their tail section, right? It's like when dragonflies mate. It's because there are two heads. So I got it wrong. I'm sorry.
No problem. Compared to two, one was still a lot easier, was what Layfon thought. The battlefield isn't somewhere you can get careless, okay?
As if reading Layfon's mind came those words of warning. Although Obesan's words weren't actually severe, they were like water seeping into soil, irrefutable. They no longer had any time to be having a conversation.
Well, I hope you have an enjoyable fight. Once again, hearing those words he heard 2 days ago, Delbone's voice vanished, and following immediately, the mature phase opened its two huge mouths and rushed towards Layfon with urgency.
Layfon jumped up, avoiding it. The mature phase's lower half smashed the hard ground apart.
The upper half was chasing Layfon as he rapidly ascended. Tugging the lower half after it, the two halves eventually switched places. It was as if they were twining around each other as they chased Layfon. After adjusting his posture mid-air, Layfon engaged the mature phase in attack. External type burst K, Sendan. The blade emitted brightly colored K. A paper-thin shockwave cut through a part of the mature phase's wing and sliced the tail section where the two were connected. The filth monster's two halves let out a fierce wail. The scream itself had a lot of force behind it, completely sending Layfon's small body flying. If you said a creature had two heads, then a 10-year-old child won't understand. Could you not kill it even if you cut off a head? As for the mature phases that came in all shapes and sizes, all that he had heard about them was that the scales on their heads were extremely hard. Then, what about the section that connected the two bodies together? Although he had suspicions like a child's curiosity, it was a fact that that part moved the least and was the easiest to target.
The Sendan beautifully divided the tail portion into two. From the wound came spraying out a viscous liquid.
However, the two separated parts were both still moving individually. Although he was unable to kill the filth monster, Layfon was hardly depressed at all. At any rate, he should land before worrying about anything else. The enraged mature phase filth monsters performed even more complex movements than when it was whole, in order to get closer to Layfon while preventing his escape. Layfon didn't retreat or evade, and instead took a deep breath on the spot. His breath temporarily fogged up his line of sight through the helmet. Layfon was filled with K. In that moment, with the heat pressing down on his whole body, he gathered it all on his blade. External type burst K, Galkin, resounding blade. The blade of the sword became wider and longer, transforming into a huge sword taller than Layfon, a sword that had been infused with K. This was a technique that could be used by any military artist of a sword-using style. However, normal Deets were unable to withstand the highly concentrated K that Layfon emitted and would self-destruct. For normal military artists, they were unable to use the technique to such an extent as to cause the blade to self-destruct. That's why for Layfon, if he didn't have the Heaven's Blade, he was unable to use this technique. Even at birth, Layfon possessed an enormous amount of K. Was he adopted only because of that? He had also thought about this before. However, it was only because he had this power that he could become a Heaven's Blade. By becoming a Heaven's Blade, he could even better help the orphanage.
When Layfon was very young, he realized that this was what life is all about. It was fortune and misfortune blended together.
One moment of fortune was the result of overcoming many misfortunes, and a series of misfortunes laid the foundation for happiness to come. Of course, he wanted good fortune to come. It was because of his talent that allowed him to be adopted. However, it was thanks to this that he was able to meet Derek and Liren. However, because they were in an orphanage, they experienced many tragedies as a result of the lack of food. But because he was a military artist, he could rely on his military artist grants to slightly ease the orphanage's suffering. And in order to never be in such a state again, he decided to fully utilize his own abilities to become a Heaven's Blade.
After becoming a Heaven's Blade, there was definitely the happiness that he was awaiting for. Layfon firmly believed this.
And then, he became a Heaven's Blade. The huge sword was one that even adult military artists couldn't properly grip, yet Layfon wielded it with ease. He aimed at the circling mature phase. Making a feint, he rushed towards the mature phase in front of him, stepping on its forehead and jumping once again, somersaulting in the air.
As Layfon twisted in the air, the two halves collided with each other before his eyes. There was a resounding boom.
The vibrations from the sound shook the outside of the contamination suit, and the sound of small pebbles striking the helmet could be heard. Layfon held the gigantic sword in a reverse grip and landed on the mature phase's back. Then he plunged the sword into it and pulled out the Heaven's Blade. All that was left was the Dite-infused blade of the sword. He then jumped up. The remaining Gauken was blasted apart. It transformed into numerous sendan and sliced the mature phase's body all over.
Good. Escaping from the chaos of the storm of scattered sendan, Layfon mentally pumped his fist. He had always wanted to know if he could do this, and he had always trained in his mind.
And the result made Layfon felt very satisfied. Is it possible to focus the direction of the explosions onto a single point? If he can immediately get to that level next time, as he was thinking this, he landed and ran beside the mature phase's body.
The effective area of the Gauken explosion was even smaller than he had imagined. Even though this was something for him to improve on later, at least he had managed to dispatch a mature phase. As long as it was effective, it was okay, thought Layfon as he ran. Suddenly, the back of the filth monster cracked open.
Ugh! It wasn't the result of the Gauken. From the vibrations he felt underfoot, it seemed that the cracking had come from within. Something was surging out from within. Before any sound from the cracking could be heard, Layfon had already jumped. The scales and flesh of the mature phase burst open, and from it surged countless larvae.
This probably counted as his carelessness, right? In the prior lectures about mature phases, he had heard that among filth monsters, they were the ones who had given up the ability to reproduce. He had also heard that if filth monsters wanted to reproduce, they had to molt into the female form. And he heard one more thing about mature phases. There were strange transforming types. The pair in front of his eyes were exactly that type. The two in front of him looked to be a pair. They were clearly mature phase, but they hadn't given up the ability to reproduce. Or rather, they had become mature phases that had found some abnormal way to reproduce. At any rate, in order to escape the larvae that were gushing out of the mature phase's body, Layfon jumped. He was a fraction of a second too slow. His shoe was caught on a larva. It reduced his jumping power by a lot. The silver lining in the cloud was the fact that only the sole of the shoe had been caught. It was just that the sole of the shoe was shaved away a little and hadn't made a hole through which pollutants could seep through. However, the momentum of his jump had been reduced, and it undeniably caused Layfon to lose his balance. Without any threats to it, the mature phase did not fail to take advantage of that opening. It opened its maw to swallow up Layfon.
Ara. Layfon has been swallowed.
Oh, is that so?
Lintens was standing alone on the outskirts of the city, and hearing Delbone's words allowed him to understand the situation. Although the sense of touch from the steel wires allowed a general understanding of the situation, the information it delivered couldn't be compared to the precision of psychokinesis. The mature phase flew towards the sky. For the moment, Lintens took care of the larvae that were overflowing.
What are you going to do?
He's still alive, right?
His life signal is very clear.
The protective suit should be able to resist the digestive fluids of the filth monster for a few...
Yes, I've heard that it can.
Then I'm sure he'll be able to solve the problem on his own.
Era, so harsh. Isn't he your disciple?
From the way Delbone spoke, it seemed she was extremely interested by Lintens's reaction.
I never intended to take him as my disciple. I'm only teaching him a little. Also, if he's struggling at just this level of an opponent, what is he going to do in the future?
Even if that is the case, regardless of what you say, he's still just a child. He's like a grandchild to me. If he died in battle like this, wouldn't it be rather young?
If the city is destroyed, then there will be children even younger than him who will perish. That they would die in battle was something that they never put into consideration. Weak military are...
This was the cold-blooded reality of the battlefield. However, Layfon understood these principles from a young age, and like this, without any unnecessary reserve, without any unnecessary blame, he underwent the baptism of these principles.
Although I don't have children, there's also a time to spoil children, is there not? I love my grandson very much, though. His parents can take care of his education.
She clearly indicated that it had absolutely nothing to do with her and passed the responsibility of education onto Lintons.
Really, such careless words.
Of course, if you asked why, it's because I've already experienced this sort of hard work. It's obvious that this sort of work should be done by those who've never experienced it. Ara.
Halfway through their conversation, Delbone's attention seemed to have wandered off elsewhere.
A message from Her Majesty. Bring Layfon to the palace garden.
Tell her we're in the middle of a battle.
Her Majesty understands this.
How disorganized. What reason is there to act upon a child's impulse?
You see, that child was orphaned very young, so Her Majesty has no choice but to take over the responsibilities of a parent, right?
I can't take this anymore.
Lintons moved his body a little, and the steel wires abided by their master's will and silently began to move. After confirming that the steel wires had wrapped around the mature phase that was coming this way, Lintons had still not moved a finger and used the various rocky outcrops within a few kilomels of the Regios to restrain it.
Tell Her Majesty to increase the density of the air purification machine. At this rate,
Even if you didn't say it, Her Majesty would have done it anyway.
Dispersing the strong resistance resulting from the extremely heavy weight among the various rocky outcrops, Linton started his large-scale fishing activity.
Going back in time a little, Alshera was considering how to deal with the scene before her.
In any case, Your Majesty, please forgive us.
Calvin was kneeling before Alshera. His clothes were tattered and dirty, and blood was oozing from all over his body. Although Severus and Canaris were able to stand up, after they did, they couldn't move a muscle. The only one who couldn't move was Calvin, so it probably had something to do with the fact that he was the oldest, right? Well, even if age was a factor, it shouldn't have that much of an effect, right? Alshera thought to herself. His physical body was already past its peak, and even now the downwards trend could be seen. However, being unable to match up to two young people just because of this is inexcusable. Compared to those things, what she cared about most was Calvin's attitude.
Was this your plan from the very start?
Alshera furrowed her eyebrows, glaring at Calvin, who had lowered his head, kneeling.
The incident this time is definitely disloyal behavior, and it's irreversible. But taking Her Majesty's circumstances into consideration, we did this precisely for those who, for the sake of protecting the bloodlines, could not be born.
Then, are you saying that the fault lies with the system of the three royal families?
Calvin had stood on Mince's side because he wanted to take up the role of a problem solver. Of course, he was also displeased by Alshera increasing the number of Heaven's Blade successors, but he was really here so that he could appeal to Alshera directly.
Which was why Mince was able to propose such a harebrained plan to him. And Calvin didn't reject the plan either, so it was probably that personality of his that led to a result like this.
Rather than say you like to work too hard, it's better to say this situation was caused by that personality of yours. Go find a way to change it for me.
And you say this only now. Till today I've lived my whole life with this personality, and I have no intention of changing it.
Calvin raised his head. His forehead was fractured, and blood was seeping out from the wound. Half his face was dyed crimson, and his eyes revealed a light that showed he wasn't afraid of death. This made Alshera lose interest.
The Saiharden dojo has decided to expand. Although I was going to pay for the grants, I'll have all expenses paid by your three dojos.
Your Majesty!
I don't want to break my sword over such a trivial matter.
Not responding to Calvin's wishes, Alshera redirected her attention to the other two and looked at Severus.
Well, what about you? Are you satisfied?
Well, Your Majesty is simply too strong.
Suppressing his already broken left hand, Severus replied with a smile. A glance at the sweat dripping off his forehead made it obvious that the smile was a forced one.
And I was hoping to have a bit of a competition to see who was stronger.
That's a little naive of you, isn't it? Well, what about you, Canaris?
Canaris knelt there, motionless, but everyone there noticed her quivering shoulders.
You're crying.
A trembling Canaris gradually lifted her head. Her face was covered with dirt, and she spoke with faltering lips.
Your Majesty, you really don't need us anymore.
Huh.
Faced with such unexpected words, Alshera was also very taken aback. The tears that cut across Canaris's cheeks as she raised her head looked like thin pieces of string being guided out from her eyes. Because I was raised for the sake of becoming Her Majesty's shadow, and since Her Majesty no longer needs me.
Alshera touched her head, realizing what Canaris meant.
Canaris came from the dojo that was set up by the descendants of the three royal families.
One aspect of the dojo was to foster children from the three royal families that didn't become the heads of their respective families. At the same time, members of this dojo were also responsible for the security of the palace. These duties, of course, included the protection of Her Royal Highness, and if they were protecting Her Majesty during public ceremonies, then for Canaris this also included the job of being a Kagamusha, protector in the shadows. Kanari's abilities had surpassed those of her peers a long time ago, so she was raised within the Rivenesu dojo as Alshera's shadow, and Canaris had responded to the dojo's expectations, becoming a Heaven's Blade at just 15. However, Alshera had denied Canaris that post.
That's because you don't look like me at all, right?
Something as trivial as that can be done with plastic surgery.
Canaris appealed while wiping her tears away.
Huh, you'll get plastic surgery to match beauties such as mine.
Alshera's incredulous manner left everyone present dumbstruck, and then Canaris began bawling loudly.
Wow, I'm better off dead.
Canaris was completely serious, as she held her rapier in a reverse grip and thrust it towards her throat. Seeing this, Alshiraya instantly snatched the rapier from her hand.
I can't take this anymore. Stop this right now.
Even though she was deprived of her sword, Canaris continued thrusting her empty hand towards her own throat. Alshera caught that hand with some difficulty, and after suppressing the suicidal Canaris, the sound of someone's laughter came drifting over from the walkway.
It's great to see that everyone is so lively.
Tig-G, is this really the time to be laughing?
Carefully controlling the Heaven's Blade successors, who were rowdy like a bunch of little kids indeed, needed some skill. It had made Alsharia break out in sweat for the first time.
Even if this had made the guest who had just arrived laugh aloud, she didn't find this situation amusing in the least. Tigris Noiran Ronsmir. He was a Heaven's Blade successor, as well as the head of the last of the three royal families, the Ronsmir family.
Aren't you going to do anything else other than laugh?
Calvin, about you.
Alshera immediately realized why Tigris had appeared at this place at this moment. If you were to choose someone to take the role of troubleshooter and problem solver, then the man who was a Heaven's Blade successor, an elder second only to Delbone and Alshera's grandfather, Tigris, was ideal. Although more than half his head had balded cleanly, the remaining hairs had also lost their luster. However, his face and body still radiated vitality.
Even though the king holds absolute power, if he doesn't tell his own thoughts to his subordinates frequently, then they will become disobedient, right?
But things like a Kagamusha, protector in the shadows, I don't need that at all. Quite frankly, it's a role that's even more boring than being a palace guard. Other than GEG and Mins, who else would try and assassinate me anyway?
The fact is, when you compared the palace guards to the Heaven's Blade successors, they were definitely doing a redundant job. But it's not like they were in anybody's way either. As for those palace guards who patrolled between the palace and the city wearing those resplendent uniforms all the time, they were the children who were not the heirs to the royal families. It was a job that didn't bring shame to their respective families, while acting as a buffer that allowed them to obediently become reborn as commoners. Roles to protect the king from assassination were unnecessary as well. It wasn't because Alshera was too strong, but because there was no point in assassinating the king. Interaction with other cities was minimal, and in truth, controlling other cities was physically impossible, so killing the rulers of other cities didn't have any benefit at all. At the same time, in a political assassination situation like this, the only one who would plan an assassination would be those who benefited most from it, those aligned with the three royal families. And choosing the palace guards and Kadimusha from the royal families only increased the likelihood that they would become assassins. It really was putting the cart before the horse. And this job was one that was as idle as that of a palace guard. In other words, it was a decorative role born out of the formality of official events.
There isn't any need to make a Heaven's Blade serve that role, is there?
But there just happened to be people in this world who were raised for that specific purpose. And these people obviously hold strong convictions about the role they undertake. Please understand, Your Majesty, that if you don't want them restrained like that, then you must do something for them.
Ugh.
If you think it's a bother, you might as well give her your recognition. Wouldn't that solve all the problems?
It was unclear when Canaris had stopped crying, her eyes fixed upon Alshera. The others were also waiting for what Alshera would say next.
At any rate, I'll hold a test. I don't want my Kagamusha to be an idiot.
Yes. Canaris nodded her head happily. Alshera revealed an inexplicably bitter smile.
Well then.
Alshera turned her gaze past the happily smiling Canaris and looked at the last person. In all, she had dealt with the problems of the three Heaven's Blades, and after was, Al-Shayra watched Mince. The youth who had blankly watched the scenario unfold turned ashen when he caught Al-Shayra's eyes.
Tigji, what do you think we should do?
Hearing this, Mince cast a look begging for help towards Tigris. However, the elder stroked his proud beard, ignoring Mince's glances.
After his brother left, only this child was left. It seems we've coddled him far too much. Punishing him will be a very appropriate decision.
Hearing Tigris's emotionless words, Mince's ashen face suddenly turned a tragic white. It looks like my family has no choice but to subsidize the Sai-Harden dojo to smooth this event over.
The continuous Heaven's Blade inauguration ceremonies have made the royal coffers a little lonely, even though they weren't that extravagant anyway. At any rate, making me provide funds when the treasury is tight makes things very hard.
Then, what does your majesty intend to do?
What should I do?
Al-Shayra pondered the problem briefly and began conversing through some nearby psychokinesis flakes with Delbone.
It looks like that side hasn't gone well either. Why don't we have a punishment game?
Minutes and seconds ticked by. But for Mince, that time was like waiting for the execution of his death penalty.
No matter how much time passed, his facial expression didn't improve. At this moment, a shadow appeared above the palace gardens. The shadow, along with the noise, became rapidly larger. The entire cast at the scene turned their eyes towards the sky. Al-Shayra, the Heaven's Blade successors, and the rest didn't let out any gasps of surprise. This was because they immediately knew whose masterpiece this was.
A filth monster descended from the sky. But it was merely a part of it. The head and body had been sliced away, and only the abdomen landed in the middle of the mid-air garden.
It looks like I'll have to completely renovate this place.
As Al-Shayra vented her complaints, she surveyed the remains of the filth monster. Looking at the wounds that were mutilated beyond recognition, it looked to have been cut up by Lintens's steel wires. However, describing the wounds as pockmarks caused by explosions would be more appropriate. The filth monster's fluids flowed out from various places, forming a puddle that gave off a stench. Just as the entire cast had their attention on the filth monster, a sword suddenly stabbed out from the inside of the abdomen. The sword first sliced the abdomen apart, before it traced a small circular opening. After pushing the cut flesh down from the inside, a child's figure wearing a contamination suit covered in fluids crawled out.
Such misfortune.
From within the helmet came a muffled voice that was shrill, befitting that stature. That child was Layfon.
I was way too naive. There's no way I can kill it like that.
As he said this, Layfon used his hands, slippery from the body fluids, to remove his helmet.
Your Majesty, you called.
I did.
Looking at Layfon, who was unperturbed even in a circumstance like this, made Al-Shayra feel that he was very uncute.
The uniform was newly issued, yet you ruined it so quickly. It isn't very cheap either.
I'm sorry.
Looking at Layfon apologizing so obediently, Al-Shayra stuck out her tongue.
Busy tea, this won't do. Therefore, we'll have a punishment game. You, go fight Mince over there.
Even though he wasn't perturbed, Layfon didn't understand the situation at hand. Perhaps he hadn't given the situation around him any thought after climbing out from the insides of the filth monster. Al-Shayra cast the surprised Layfon aside and looked towards Mince.
Mince, if I just punished you like this, you probably wouldn't accept it, right? So I'll give you a chance. If you can beat Layfon, then I'll give this Heaven's Blade to you. Of course, in return, if you lose, you'll have to bear the entire cost of renovating the garden.
That! Al-Shayra was pointing at where the filth monster that delivered Layfon had landed. After learning the contents of the so-called punishment, Mince stunned.
Ara, this garden cost a lot of money.
Ooh. Mince was speechless and just stood there, dumbstruck.
If you want to start a rebellion, you have to use your brain properly. Frankly speaking, even if you're stupid, there has to be a limit, whether it's your brain or your ability or your common sense. Suppose you were lacking all three, then you really have no hope.
And Mince was disregarded so easily by Al-Shayra, just like that. He silently drew the dite he carried on his belt and restored it. The excessively decorated blade of the sword reflected the rays of the sun. Conversely, Layfon returned the Heaven's Blade to its basic state. Faced with such a flippant attitude, Mince shouted in rage. But Layfon paid him no heed at all and turned to Al-Shayra.
I can use any weapon at all, right?
Anything you like.
Hearing Al-Shayra's answer, Layfon cracked a wide, happy smile. It was a smile befitting of his age, an innocent smile.
Awesome. I've always wanted to try this.
Layfon squatted down on the spot and picked up a small pebble from the ground. It was debris created because the stone masonry was exposed to the sudden shock of battle.
Then I'll be using this.
That is to say, that rock was going to be Layfon's weapon.
Mintz screamed madly and charged at Layfon, but Layfon threw the stone he held in his hand. There was no arc, and it raced straight towards Mintz. Mintz easily avoided it and caught Layfon within his attacking range. He won. Standing before a defenseless Layfon, Mintz revealed a self-confident smirk.
I'm back.
Liren, hearing these words, was something that happened 2 hours after she had come out from taking refuge. Liren was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and seeing Layfon walk in through the back door, she was filled with relief.
I'm starving to death.
Okay, just wait a little longer.
As promised, I didn't get hurt at all. Okay.
I know that.
Liren muttered helplessly. Among her prepared ingredients, green wild vegetables were nowhere to be seen, instead replaced by red and yellow veggies. Of course, she had also prepared a lot of meat.
This is great.
Liren noticed that the happily smiling Layfon looked as if he was holding something in his hand.
What's that?
Ah, you mean this.
Layfon opened up his hand to show Liren what he was holding.
A rock.
It was a rock that looked like it was a piece of shattered stonework.
Watch this.
Layfon hadn't finished speaking, and he threw it towards the ceiling. He hadn't used any military arts, and had just thrown it normally.
What's so good about that?
As she said this, Liren watched what happened next, stunned. The stone that was slowly rising towards the ceiling had changed directions. The stone that was shooting around left and right suddenly returned to Layfon's hand.
This is what I thought up today. Great, isn't it?
Looking at her self-satisfied childhood friend, Liren's surprised expression turned into one of helplessness.
Okay. Stop messing with those tricks. Go wash your hands. Oh yeah, why don't you go take a bath to get rid of your sweat? It feels like your body stinks a lot.
Okay, tilde.
Looking at Layfon's face filled with wonder as he dove into the bath, Liren couldn't help but smile. 5 years later, after Layfon's match with Gahard Baron had ended, his inappropriate behavior was exposed. The masses were astonished by his power, and in truth they were worried about the dangers of his powers going out of control. However, the ones that treated him most like a danger and spoke out against him the loudest was the Utnol family. This was something that a mere 10-year-old wouldn't consider.